gas masks and hand grenades. Gas masks and hand grenades. Gas masks and hand grenades. Gas masks and hand grenades.
Well, hello there, everybody. It is Gas Masks and Hand Grenades. I am your host, Jeff. And look who has bravely or foolishly returned. We'll find out. This guy right here, Mr. Mike Browning. Mike, good to see you again. Thanks for coming back so we could kind of broach some of the topics that we really didn't get to do the first time around in about a month ago. So
yeah, that one was set up pretty short. So this one we can definitely do a little longer.
Yeah, we will, and I won't keep you here forever. I have a tendency when I get into these things with some of the OGs, of the Florida death metal scene. I get really into it, nerdy, and start asking a lot of minutia type questions. But we'll try to keep it in the hour and a half range at the most. So, good to see you. Glad you got here. I guess the first place I'd like to kind of start is. And I know it's a generic question, and we kind of touched on it a little bit in the first interview, but I want to take you back. I want to take you way back to when Mike Browning was a wee lad, and I kind of want to know what your first memories are. And I know we're both. Well, you're a what is it called? Sextagenarian? Is that what they call it? If you're in your no, I don't mean it that way, but I mean, I think it's sectagenarian for a guy in his 60s, and I'm right there behind you. I'm 2 years behind you.
Yeah, it just happened. So.
Right. And mine just happened too.
Now finally, but that's a long time.
It's a damn long time, dude. And I can tell you right now, I feel every minute of it at this point. So, what are your first memories as a young guy, a young Florida guy? Because you've always stayed in the Tampa area, right? You're in that area, right?
Oh yeah. I've always lived in Tampa. So,
what's your first memories of music? Like what And I always ask this by kind of countering with my first memories of music was the music that my mom played, which was like the AOR of the 70s, right? That's just the first time I remember hearing stuff like Bridge Over Troubled Water and Carole King Tapestry and James Taylor, stuff like that. And that kind of, my mom and my dad was listening to classical music. He was already like an old guy before he was remotely old. You know what I mean? But, which now I appreciate, but back then I was like, man, this dude's really old, But those are the things I remember. What are your first memories?
Well, it's kind of funny you mentioned that because my mom she used to sing in a rock band.
Oh, cool.
But it was they only did local stuff, just local bars and things like that. And you said Carole King, she sang stuff like that, and it was but they used to practice at the house. I mean, her band it only lasted maybe about a year or so. So, but and she was a singer, and it was just a three other guys, guitar player, drummer, and bass player. And pretty basic rock kind of band, but not real heavy rock or anything, but just rock.
Right. AOR rock, right? And, like AOR rock of the era, like the AOR stuff that you would hear. Yeah. I guess it would be back then. It would have been AM radio, probably not FM even yet, right?
Yeah. I'm not really sure. I think FM was around maybe. But it was like stuff like CCR and Carole King and
right.
That you mentioned. And I used to watch them. And I always used to watch the drummer play, and I always thought that was kind of cool. So when in school, when we started doing like band music stuff, like I think it was 6th, 7th grade, right around there, I wanted to play the drums. So I started doing that, and in 8th and 9th, I was high school was 10th, 11th, and 12th for us. 8th and 9th was what was called junior high. So I was in the band for 8th and 9th, and played drums and did all kinds of timpanis and marching band and all that. Then went into high school in 10th grade. I I did marching band as well. But the problem with that was that to be in the jazz band, you had to be in the marching band.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I
But the
did
jazz,
it.
as I remember, Mike, the jazz band from high school was kind of like the cool place to go. You didn't really want to go to the marching band because that was kind of the nerds. But the jazz band was like, oh man, this is cool. They have a guitar player, right? You know, that kind of
But
thing.
you had to do that though. That's the thing. If you couldn't be in the jazz band without being in the marching band.
Okay. Hey, by the way, we should mention before we go any further, real quick. Sorry to interrupt. We should mention your dog. You do have a sick dog that you're.
Yeah, he's coughing again.
Yeah.
He has little fits of coughing. He's got congestive heart failure, and he's on like 3 medications. So, it's fluid gets in his heart, and
we just wanted to clear that up so that people didn't think you had somebody tied up and gagged in the corner there. Although maybe you do. Maybe we don't know. You know.
Well, that's what ball gags are for.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
All
right, so back to the jazz band.
Yeah, so the thing was, to be in the marching band, you had to practice like 2 hours a day after school.
Yeah. Yep.
And after 10th grade, it just was not possible for me to do that. I had to work.
Yeah.
You know, if I wanted a car, you know, which I wanted a car, you know, and to afford a car, my mom wasn't rich, so I had to work. So I had to quit the band in 11, you know, the school band. And then it was just like, well, you know, what do I do now? So in 11th grade, I kind of got a drum set then and my own and started working on, you know, just playing drums to records. And the thing was, we had, well, you don't have this too much anymore, but you know, the independent record stores.
Right. Yep.
And right down the street from my house, there was a record store called Asylum Records. And this guy, I think his name was Fred, that owned it. And I remembered him. And so I used to ride my bike there before I even had a car. And he used to get, you know, the British
imports,
new wave of metal type stuff. He used to, you know, he was getting all that in back then, because we're talking like 1978, 79, you know, right around there. And so he used to get these, you know, albums, and he was playing them all the time in the store, which was cool because he would show me the cover and I'd be like, whoa, you know.
Yeah.
And then then you know, I would actually be able to hear some of it in there because he loved playing that stuff.
Yeah.
So I would buy a record, you know, probably one a week or so, and I would, you know, carry it home on my bicycle.
Wow.
And I had one of the stereo systems with the big speakers and stuff. And I had it literally right behind my drum set with a turntable, because you didn't have CDs, you didn't have cassettes, you didn't have, you know, cell phones, anything, internet, nothing. So I would put the record on and literally, you know, just like reach behind me and drop the needle and then just start playing along with the album. So that was like the first of it. So I was trying to play stuff like that, you know.
Was that did you play in the basement or the garage or your room or what?
Well, my mom's house had a back room.
Okay.
There's no basements in Florida. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's right. I lived in Texas. Right. I forgot about that.
There's no basements in Florida. Unfortunately, that would have been a great thing if I had one. But she had like a back room that's called like a Florida room, and it's just a room in the back. And I kind of converted that into a bedroom where I could put a drum set in and everything. So I kind of had like a really big room, almost the size of a living room for a bedroom.
Oh, wow. Oh,
but
cool.
it had, well, not quite as big as a living room, but close. So definitely bigger than a bedroom.
Okay.
And so I, you know, had my drums back there, had the stereo behind it, and a you know, a water bed, of course.
That's pretty cool, man. Do you remember
what water beds are?
Well, yeah, I mean back then they had water beds back then, really?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Well, I didn't know anybody up here that had one in the 70s, so that's pretty cool. I mean, that kind of sounded pretty naive, but you know, I just was like, wow, I thought that was like an 80s thing. I remember the first time I sat on one, I was like, whoa, what the fuck? It was so weird.
Well, you're talking 80, you know, about 79, 80.
Okay,
right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Do you remember like the first, like, do you have brothers and sisters at all? No. Okay, so you're an only child. Because a lot of us, I was the oldest, so a lot of us get our music through that kind of lineage. But I have a brother that's 5 years younger, so we, you know, I was always like, when he was a little kid, I wanted to beat him up all the time. or terrorize him or something like that. And then, I was that punk, so most of my music came via my mom initially. And then where I really remember hearing like the cool rock music was at the pool. We had a community pool, and we'd all go there in the summer, and be Steely Dan and Pablo Cruz and 10cc and all those killer early 70s and mid 70s band. Do you have any memories of like what that first maybe like thing is that you heard, but then what the first like rock, like really hard rock type thing is that you heard?
Well, yeah, I mean, my mom had all those records because she sang, of course,
right?
And the one thing I remember, even when I was even younger than that, I was probably 7 or 8, somewhere around there, and I remember seeing the cover of that first Black Sabbath record, and the lady on the front, it was
so
just like
scary,
and she was scary, and I would just be like, wow. And I used to always watch the Friday night horror movies and the Saturday afternoon horror movies, back then. Anyway, I loved that kind of stuff, and I used to look at that cover and just go, "Wow, this is crazy looking." She's scary. And I heard the record, and I remember the Rain and everything with the Black Sabbath, the original Black Sabbath song.
That tritone, that evil.
I think that had an effect on me because I really, I liked it actually. I thought it was scary back then, but I actually liked it.
Oh yeah.
So I think that was like probably the first start of it.
That's a good place to start, man. I mean, you're talking like right there at the beginning of heavy metal for the most part, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love stuff like Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, of course, and all the stuff around that kind of Deep Purple, things like that. I was starting to get into the heavier rock, of course, Rainbow.
Did you get into like any prog, like Yes and Genesis and? Yeah, I figured you were a prog guy, so we're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Rush, especially when I started hearing Rush, that was it.
The greatest band ever. Sorry,
this band is from another planet.
Absolutely, Rush,
they didn't sound with the vocals the way they were and everything. They didn't sound like anybody.
Nope, and I didn't come into them. I remember definitively how I got into Rush. I was in 7th grade, and in Texas, it was 6th, 7th, 8th was middle school, 9, 10, 11, 12 was high school. And I remember I was in 7th grade, and there was this stoner dude. His name was Mike. I don't remember his last name, but everybody called him Flake, like cornflake, Flake, because he would kind of like walk like a wet. He was just like, he was always fucking stoned when he would come into class. And I didn't even really know yet at that point at 7th grade what weed was yet. I think I found out right around 7th, 8th grade. But he came in with the freaking baseball jersey of the Rush Hemispheres tour shirt with the Starman, and I'm like, that is the coolest shirt I've ever seen. And as fate would have it, I remember we were at Greens Point Mall in Houston, Texas. I lived there for 4 years. I was PA boy. We moved to Texas, then moved back to Pennsylvania after 4 years. My mom hated it. And I saw Hemispheres sitting at whatever the music part of that department store was. And I just saw that album. And it is my favorite album of all time, bar none. It's my favorite album. It did something to me. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I remember going to my mom going, Mom, can I please get that? I'll cut the lawn. I'll pick up the dog shit. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Clean, the drill. I'll put the dishes away, all that kind of stuff. And that had a profound effect on me. That was my first Rush album. And then Rush was my second show I got to see in 1980. So you have any kind of stories like that?
Yeah, I mean, I do remember, I think I was 16 when Tom Sawyer came out. And most of the radio stations back then used to play like a whole album side or even a whole album. So,
really?
Yeah, we had I think it was called 98 Rock. It was called the Album Station. And,
wow.
And they would play, like a half, one side or even a full side of, especially when something would come out. And, I remember when Tom Sawyer came out, it sounded like music from outer space. I'd never heard anything quite like it. Yeah. I was like, wow. And then the drumming was incredible on it. And I was just flabbergasted by this band, and you know, so I really liked that a lot. But then I was also like when Dio had came into Black Sabbath, you know, and that
1980. Yeah.
That was 1980, and you know, that just blew me away as well. And I was like, this is incredible music. You know, Black Sabbath to me went to another level when that happened, and especially you know, the Mob Rules is just amazing.
Do you prefer the Dio era over the Ozzy era, or is it, you know, because I do technically. I do.
I mean, I kind of do, but then there's songs that just can't be beat, like the song "The Wizard" or Black Sabbath. You know, some of those songs, you know, you can't really say that anything's better than that when it came out.
Yeah.
Especially for the time that it came out.
Yeah. So when did you start playing drums again? Remind me.
Well, 6th grade, so it was probably like 7th grade. I
12.
actually started playing kind of, you know, 6th grade, you just kind of picked out an instrument. And
you know. or you start with the drum pad, right? The drum pad.
Snare drum, like just a snare drum kind of thing, and percussion, things
like that. Did you take lessons? Did you take lessons?
No, I never really. I did actually for about a month. I took some lessons, and it was just for my mom. It was kind of expensive, and so I didn't really stick with the lessons because she had to drive. This was before I even got a car,
right?
So she would drive me there, and it was like kind of farther away. It was this guy. He was giving him out of his house, and you know, so I went maybe 3 or 4 times, and my mom was like, "This just isn't working," you know. So
you are pretty much self-taught then.
Yeah, I mean, you know, besides what you learn in school from it, which was still quite a bit.
And you did what, 2 years in the marching band or no?
8th and 9th was junior high, and I did. We had a marching band in junior high as well, so I did that. But then when I got into high school, which for us was 10th, 11th, and 12th, I did it in 10th grade only. But we did a lot of halftime shows. Like we did halftime shows for the Miami Dolphins. We did a halftime show for the Buccaneers. You know, the parades, local parades that we have here. We did several of those. So I did a lot of marching stuff, and I wasn't like the head drummer or anything because I was only in 10th grade. But when I was in the marching band, I was doing the crash cymbals. But you know, we would spin them. And
are you talking about that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, you know, but like in 8th and 9th, I was doing timpani and stuff like that, which was really cool. So it, you know, it was, you had to work your way up when you got into the high school band. You had to start, you know, so at least I wasn't playing the triangle. But now the crash cymbals were kind of fun though, because you do all these really weird, like, you know, stuff like that. And then you'd spin them up in the air. And we did like these crazy halftime shows like FAMU does, where they dance. And in fact,
so you'd actually be out on the field doing the stuff and marching while you're doing your routine. Yeah,
we did formations, and our teacher, he used to actually go up to FAMU, Florida A&M University, and tape their halftime shows, and he'd make his own halftime show kind of based on theirs. So we'd be doing all kinds of, you know, where the fancy, you know, marching band stuff where the whole band splits up and starts doing all kinds of different stuff. Making formations on the field. So it was kind of cool to do that. I kind of wish I had been able to stick with it longer, because that was kind of fun. But, you know, 2 hours a day doesn't leave much time for anything else in life.
Yeah. What was your first job?
Let me see.
Fast food. Mine was fast food. McDonald's.
Yeah, I definitely. Probably my first job was at Burger Chef.
Actually, I lied. I just said McDonald's. That was my second job. My first job was I was lucky because my mom was the manager. There used to be a chain. I don't know if they exist anymore. About 20 years ago, they did. I saw one in Maryland, but there was a chain of restaurants called Steak and Ale. I don't know if they had those down.
Yeah, we had those.
Remember them? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I was the salad boy guy. I was a salad bar guy. So I was always, you know, putting ice in the salad. But we have one of those big bars, you know, that you see. Sometimes you see them out in like fancy, like grocery stores and stuff now. And that was my job. And then I graduated, man. I really jumped up. I went to busboy. Then I got tips, you know, and I remember being like, I think I was down there. You had to get work papers if you were under 15, you had to get working papers, and your parent had to sign it, and probably was like that for you too. But I remember, I think I was 14, 13 or 14, I think it was, and I remember just being like, this is kind of embarrassing to admit, but I remember like I was like 14 or 15, and all the waitresses were all like 20 or over. So I'd crush on a different waitress every other week or other day. And I'd be like, man, if I could just go hang out with them in the bar and play Asteroids. You remember Asteroids? We had an Asteroids game.
That was probably my favorite game.
Actually, I love that game. Loved it. Yeah. So, well, real quick. So let's transition into high school, because that's a pretty important thing for you, because I believe as a senior, you meet a younger guy that comes into high school, a transplant, right? And that's kind of where, is that your very first band?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So tell that story.
Well, I was in my last year of high school, and they had a place where a lot of people, I didn't smoke cigarettes ever really, but were the cool, the non-preppy people kind of
they were called the heads in my
yeah.
Heads. Yeah,
they called it that too. Yeah, the stoners, whatever you want to call it. But there was a place called the Alley, which was on the side of the school, where they actually let people smoke and stuff. So
wow.
Yeah, it was kind of, well, you're talking what, 1981, 82 right there.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I was hanging out there one day with everybody. Everybody would meet there in the mornings, and all of a sudden there was this new kid. He had kind of long hair and everything, and he was in 11th grade and I was in 12th grade. And I think he probably moved there like about halfway through the school year. So it wasn't like right at the beginning. And then so I started talking to him, and it turned out he knew about the Satanic Bible. He knew about the Necronomicon. He was more of a, I never really played Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that, because I didn't really hang around groups of people that much.
The nerds.
Yeah, but he knew all about that stuff too. He was big time into that, and and into the game.
Still is. I think he still is. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So so we had a lot to talk about, and then I was like, oh yeah, I play drums too. And he goes, really? He goes, I just got a guitar. I just started playing guitar.
No way.
Like, wow. Yeah. So I was like, this was like really like interesting. So I said, well, we got to hang out and see if we can jam sometime, So we did. We got together, and he brought his stuff over, and we started jamming, and we found some other people and put like a little band together. That we had a singer. His name was Howard, and we were doing like Scorpions, Judas Priest, stuff like that, and kind of messing around with not originals, but not really anything that we were just kind of jamming, like songs.
So had Trey just started playing around that time, or was he? Oh wow! Yes. Holy shit!
I'll tell you one thing. When Trey got the guitar, I think for Christmas, and he picked up the guitar and just played it. He was one of those guys that just picked up a guitar and
prodigy. Yeah.
He knew how to play already somehow. He just picked it up and he was like going crazy on it. And I'm like, oh, this is going to get interesting,
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we started jamming, and then we, found a few more people and put a band together, and we called it Ice. And it was like kind of over for the abyss, like the icy cold abyss.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
And so we did the high school talent show.
All this is in your senior year? It like happened that fast? Wow.
Yeah.
No shit.
Yeah. I mean, we had probably, the talent show was 20 minutes, maybe 15, 20 minutes. Our performance. We probably did 3 or 4 songs.
What'd you do? Do you remember?
I think maybe Lights Out.
UFO.
Yeah. I think we did. I'm trying to remember. Maybe a Judas Priest song. It's really hard to remember what we played, but there was only maybe 3, 4 songs we did, and we got like people were going crazy and stuff. It was kind of cool. So
that's awesome.
But then the thing was, he moved during the summer, so we just kind of parted ways in a way, and the band sort of fell apart. at the end of the school year.
Right.
But he kind of went their separate ways, and I was graduated and I was working, and things just kind of changed. He moved way to the other side of town, and back then that was a long distance for
Long
back
ways,
then,
right?
you know. And so I did start jamming with two of the guys that I kept jamming with them, that didn't move far away, and we did a little, like, you know, commercial band. We were going to start playing out and things like that, but we never really got too far in it. Still doing the same kind of stuff, you know.
Right.
And then we were doing that and trying to work on getting a set to play out, like in a club. And I was 18, and then all of a sudden, I think I might have been close to 19 by that time. And then all of a sudden, Trey, gets a hold of me and says, "Hey, I got some other guys now, and we're jamming, and we got this drummer. He's a little bit older, and he doesn't live in Tampa, and it's just not working out with him. And we had a good time when we were jamming together. So he goes, you want to join this band I have called Death Watch?" It was called Death Watch.
Oh, that was the original Morbid Angel band name, other than Ice, I guess. Ice was kind of it, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's what happened. So, I joined Death Watch, and they had a singer named Charles, or Chuck, he went by, and he kind of sounded like the guy from Cyrith Ungle.
Oh, that high.
Yeah, he had this raspy kind of voice. And Dallas was the bass player, Dallas Ward.
Okay.
And Trey was playing guitar. So they had a drummer that was older than them, and he just wasn't kind of fitting in, I guess, with what they were doing. And so I started jamming with him. And Trey, his mom, they lived in an apartment complex, and she was like the manager there. And so she got us to be able to use the when people weren't using it, we used the little what do they call that, community
room or something like that. Yeah.
It was, right by the pool. So we didn't have a lot of PA or anything. It was just, we never mic'd anything or anything like that.
Just jamming in a room.
Yeah, we were just jamming in the room, and the singer had a little PA that he was singing with.
Mm-hmm.
And the stuff was kind of Dungeons and Dragons type stuff.
What year are we talking here? Are we talking 83, 84?
82.
Oh, 82, right.
83, 83, actually 83.
Okay.
Yeah, this would be 83. So we started doing that, and then Chuck actually got arrested. He was helping move like big amounts of cocaine. We didn't even know it.
Yeah, holy.
Yeah, and
was he older or you're?
Yeah, he was a little older than us.
Okay. Yeah,
and he went to prison for like 10 years and did it all, too. Yeah, wow. I've seen him a couple of times. I ran into him a few times at a post office a while back, but so he did like 10 years. So yeah, he stayed in there the whole time. So he didn't, so we had to kind of look for another singer at that point, and we started trying different people, and ended up Dallas kind of started singing, the bass player. So we were just a 3-piece for a long time. We did instrumental stuff, and we started actually, doing stuff like parties all the time. We started playing a bunch of parties, and then we would go out to the beach and rent a generator on a Saturday.
No way.
Set up on the beach and start playing. We had a small beach that was called the Causeway Beach, and near the end of it is before the bridge starts to go to St. Pete, well, Clearwater, I should say, to go to Clearwater. We used to just set up right there, and we would get this huge crowds of people just come, and we didn't have a PA, so we were just jamming in the dirt on the beach, in the sand, and we would get great crowds doing that stuff. It was fun. And then I remember I was at a party one time, and this guy was there that I knew, named Richard Burnell, that played guitar.
Yep.
And I said, look, we're looking for a second guitar player, because Trey was doing so much lead work all the time and just jamming off like Jimi Hendrix type stuff.
Right.
That we kind of needed somebody at that point to do some rhythm behind it.
Yeah, to fatten it up, fatten the sound up. Yeah.
And back then, we were all listening to Judas Priest and Iron
Two
Maiden
guitar bands.
Yeah, the 2 guitar stuff.
Right.
And Trey came around and was like, yeah, I think we need a second guitar player. so I can keep doing what I want to do, and then we can still have a lot of rhythm going on.
Right.
And so we got Richard in the band, and before that though, we it was called Death Watch, and then it changed to Heretic, and then we found out there was a Heretic in California or something.
Right.
I believe. Yeah, we found out there was a band called Heretic. This was probably like 1980, I want to say 84.
84.
Yeah, this is probably like mid 84, early 85. And so we changed the name from Heretic to Morbid Angel at that point. And Trey came up with that. Somebody was watching. And this is when, Celtic Frost had Morbid Tales out. So it's probably 85.
Yeah.
And somebody's told Trey, "Oh, your music is really morbid." And so he came out, he was like, "Morbid, I like that word." He came up with Morbid Angel. So we changed it to Morbid Angel, and then we were a 4-piece, and we started playing actual bigger shows.
Okay.
And we played shows with Death. We played with Massacre, things like that. We started doing the bigger shows at that point.
Well, how did you obviously you lost your singer to the cocaine bust, and is that when you kind of transitioned into being the singer, or
no, Dallas was singing.
Dallas was singing. Okay.
Yeah. And we wanted to get somebody that could sing like King Diamond, though, because none of us could sing like that, and we love Merciful Fate. We were doing Merciful Fate covers.
Okay.
Stuff like that. So we tried some singers out that said they could sing like King Diamond, and none of them really could. So
yeah.
It was we kind of abandoned that idea, and then Dallas and Richard both tried singing together, like on different songs.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard he could not sing and play guitar at the same time. Every time he went to sing, he would have to stop playing guitar.
Very hard to do.
Yeah, and that was like throwing the whole point of having 2 guitar players out
the window. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dallas was doing most of the singing anyway, and then he got arrested, and I don't even remember what it was for at that time, but he went to jail for like a year. So
wow.
It was like, oh man, now what do we do? And I think then he just kept getting arrested after that, over and over and over. So he never ended back in the band. So we got another bass player named John Ortega, and so then at that point we didn't have a singer. So I knew the words really well, and I knew the songs very well, and I was just like, I'd listened to a band called Exciter a lot.
Dan Beeler,
singing drummer. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to do this. So I tried singing and playing at the same time, and it just kind of went okay. So we decided to do that, and I probably started in late 85 or early 86. I started singing, and then we got a guy that used to live in Tampa named Mike. His name was they used to call him Metal Mike, and he was a singer too, but he had moved. And I didn't know it, but he had moved to North Carolina. And he had a band there, and his bass player was David Vincent.
Okay. So
Mike calls me and says, "Hey, I'm in this band. I think it was called Barren Cemetery." And they had Skeletor from Hallows Eve was playing guitar.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
David was playing bass, and Wayne Hartzell was the drummer.
Okay. Yep.
Who was in Morbid Angel after me, before Pete, and so he was in this band, and he said the bass player, he said he's got a huge backer with a lot of money, and he has a record label now, and I told him about you guys, and I told him about Massacre, and he wanted to sign us and Massacre, so he had a label called Goric Records. So he sent us a really good contract, and said he would put Bill Matoyer as the engineer, because he did Slayer and all the bands, Metal Blade bands he was doing.
All the Metal Blade stuff. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was famous, to us. He was a famous producer and engineer.
Big time name, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when David said that, he goes, "I'm going to pay for your recording. You come up here, record, and we'll have Bill do the engineering, and we'll do the album, do an album." And we just barely had enough for a really good album.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went up to North Carolina and recorded, and we were halfway through the recording, we finished the recording part and we were about to start doing the mix down. And David says, well, everybody go home and I'm keeping Trey here to do the mix.
Well, let me interrupt just for a sec. Was this like a proper studio? Like a, okay. All right. So I just wanted to touch, I wanted to touch on one thing before we jumped into that. Being in the Tampa scene, there were a couple bands that were pretty big in that era. And obviously that would be Avatar, Sabotage, and oh geez, I just blanked. Nasty Savage. That was where I was going. Thank you very much. Yeah. Talk about those two bands and kind of your experience with them at all, if any, and not maybe like meeting them or hanging out or whatever, but maybe seeing them live and what they meant to that scene as far as bringing credit to or maybe bringing street cred to that area.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Nasty Savage was the heavier of the two, of, them and Sabotage, because Sabotage was going a whole different route and starting to get more like, adding the keyboards and a little bit more commercialized, and they were like having success like crazy.
Yeah.
And I knew those guys quite well, actually. And
I was wondering about that. I was curious how much you knew them.
Well, I knew John a lot. I still know John Oliva, and I knew Keith, the original bass player, and Steve, the drummer. I didn't know Chris too well, the guitar player, but I knew everybody else really well. And in fact, I even had one. I bought one of Steve's drum sets at one point. So
I heard that story. I heard that crazy story.
Yeah, so I've known him for a long time, and all those. I used to go to their shows all the time. There was a place called the Brandon Pub, and they used to play there all the time. So I was a big Sabotage fan, and then Nasty Savage started doing stuff and playing shows, and they had a whole different kind of thing going on. It was just total chaos with Ronnie and the wrestling thing, and
the insanity of the whole
TVs, and it was like, this is just insane,
spectacle. And they were quite a bit more thrashy. They kind of just started to go into a more thrashy zone, and I mean, Ronnie would, he'd do the heavy vocals, but then he kind of would do the King Diamond,
right?
Not as good, but but close. He was very theatrical. The whole thing was a theatrical thing. Yeah,
and he still is. I mean, they still do exactly the same kind of crazy stuff on stage and everything. We've done several shows with them now.
I gotta get Ronnie on here. I gotta talk to you about that after we get.
That's no problem. He'd love to come on here, I'm sure.
So,
in fact, our bass player is in both bands now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's in Nasty Savage and our band, and he's also in Astronomica with Wade Black from Crimson Glory.
Right. The thing that John Drenning was kind of involved in that, or no, was Drenning in that or not? No, that's the album.
No.
That was the album title. The album title was Astronomica. Yeah,
he's got a new band called Astronomica now. So he our bass player plays in several bands, but he's awesome.
Is that Kyle?
So, yes, Kyle. Yep.
Well, he's also he did the bass for Kelly's Till the Dirt album too. So very incestuous. Lots of guys in that era were kind of switching pieces and moving people around and stuff. But you mentioned Chuck, or not Chuck. You mentioned Death, and you played opening for them, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was the one show we did. It was more of a type of thing. We played, and it was a club show we did, and I think they did headline that one. So we were starting to get pretty big though, and popular, and they were big, but they were from Orlando and we were from Tampa. So
that's right. They were Orlando. Yeah.
Yeah. They had their own whole crowd in Orlando, and we had never even went out of Tampa yet at that point.
Okay.
Well, actually, I never went out of Tampa with Morbid Angel. Everything I did with Morbid Angel was local.
Right. And then so we'll get back to North Carolina in a sec here, but it's kind of crazy for guys outside that circle. You were in that circle, but for guys like me that are outside that circle, they're starting to learn about bands. Like I remember Crimson Glory grabbing that first, the debut album, and being just like, what the fuck? Like, what is this? And then discovering Sabotage with, I believe that was not Power of the Night, the one Sirens, I guess.
Sirens was the first one, yeah.
Right. I think I remember going to the beach in '84 and walking around with all these chicks, and I met this dude that was like, he's literally wearing like a white leather jacket on the beach. I'm like, now looking back, I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, what was wrong with this guy? But he's literally walking, and he's like black, and he had the spiky, his hair's all poofed out, glam style, and he's playing Sirens. I'm like, what is that, dude? And it was like, like just like a revelation of discovering all these bands. And of course, Kerrang was the big magazine back then from Europe. And they were featuring bands like all the Florida bands were starting to be featured. You had Cannibal, you had Massacre, you had Atheist. Yeah, all these fucking bands are like happening in that mid to late 80s thing. And it must have been like when you think back about that, being a part of it, you probably have a different perspective, certainly than guys like us that are outside and looking in going, oh, this is the coolest shit ever. But how was that? Like, looking back on that, do you look back now and go, holy shit, that's insane? Like, how much?
Yeah. It's weird to see how it did grow from that. But when it was happening, we were all, metal wasn't split up like it is now. Everything was metal. Everything was metal. It was metal from Black Sabbath to Morbid Angel. It was metal.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So Sabotage was metal. Nasty Savage was metal. We were metal. Everybody was metal. Death was metal. Death metal.
Yeah.
But
right.
But and so everybody was kind of doing their own thing, and nobody was really worried about competing because nobody sounded the same at that point.
Right. Exactly.
Nobody was trying to sound like somebody else at that point, and we were all doing our own thing. So we actually got along very well back then, and did shows together all the time. We did several shows with Massacre back then, and it just everybody got along, and it was one big community. Before you had black metal, death metal, technical metal,
all the genreification thing, right? That started to.
It was all one big, type of family type of thing.
Right.
So it was like we didn't really have competitions or anything like that, with who was fastest or who was the heaviest or anything like that. That wasn't really thought of back then because we were sticking together and putting shows together, and nobody worried about stepping on anybody else's toes.
Yeah. And actually some of the variety was probably pretty cool when you would do. I was talking to, I had Scott Burns on 2 or 3 weeks ago, and just an awesome dude. And we talked. Awesome. And then Kelly, I brought Kelly in as a surprise. Scott didn't know he was coming on, which was really cool. And they hadn't seen each other in probably a year or so. And they were talking about this show, and maybe you'll remember it, at an Air Force base or like an old Army depot place. Did you guys play that or no?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
That's what I thought. I thought you were there. Yeah. Proving Grounds?
Actually, that show was I played as an early Nocturnus. It was Nocturnus.
Okay, so you were out of Morbid at that point then.
Yeah, but they played too. Morbid played, we played. A whole bunch of bands were playing this place. It was right at the end of Tampa is MacDill Air Force Base, and the last street before you go onto the base, there was this guy that owned a big warehouse, a big, huge, like 2-story warehouse.
Right.
And he was into metal, and his name was Jeff, and so he built a huge stage in there, and we just started having shows, and it wasn't a certified club or anything. It was just a party place to go and play. And so it finally, it got so big in crowds that people coming out. Obituary played there.
Yeah.
That it got closed down by the cops because
all
too many people.
All the underage shit, underage stuff, and all that kind of stuff was probably.
Yeah, and there was people would start fighting there and stuff like that. And not so much that though, but it was more of the noise thing, and that they didn't really have a permit to do what they were doing.
Yeah, so nobody was getting the money out of it.
Exactly. And it was a great place to play. It was fun. The stage was like probably 7 feet tall. So when you were up on this huge platform, and everybody was down there watching, could see you really well. all the way from the front to the back, which was pretty cool. So, and you know, we probably did 4 or 5 shows there before it got closed down.
Wow, that's awesome. And all, like you said, it was a mix of all these different bands that would come and play. Like, was Obituary Executioner still, or were they?
No, they were Obituary at that point.
They were, okay.
We did. I mean, Executioner did some shows with Morbid Angel when I was in Morbid Angel. So, and then early Nocturnus, I think we did 1 or 2 shows when they were still Executioner.
Well, let's go back to North Carolina. You're in North Carolina. You're doing your first album, and who was the record company again? I'm sorry. It
was called Goreque, Goreque, Goreque.
Okay. So you're dealing with that now, and David at this point is not in the band. Is he acting as sort of a producer then? Yeah,
he owned the label, and so he was also kind of like the producer to put everything together.
Okay.
So we recorded the album in 4 or 5 days. And once the recording was done, David said, okay, Richard, Mike, and Johnny, go home. And we're like, what? He goes, yeah, this is kind of costing more than we expected with the hotels keeping you here. So he said, I'm going to send all you guys. We had a Ryder truck too that we took the equipment. He goes, you know, and renting the truck and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to send all you guys back to Tampa, and I'm going to keep Trey here for another week, and Bill, and you know, he's just going to stay with me, and I won't have a hotel, you know, have to pay for a hotel anymore, and he's going to mix the album with Bill and me. And I was like, what? You know, this was not the plan.
Okay. Yeah.
I wanted to do certain things with my vocals. I wanted to do certain things with the drums, you know, stuff like that. And the studio that we used was a country and western, you know, country music studio in North Carolina. So the guys that worked in the studio didn't know what was going on with Morbid Angel being there.
Right.
They had no clue, and that's why he had to have somebody like Bill in there to actually, you know how to mix this and put it together and record it correctly and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, he sent us all back to Tampa and kept Trey there for another week. And when Trey came back, he was a completely different person. He was like, you know, well, there's going to be some changes. And you know, he said, first, we got to get rid of John Ortega. His bass playing on the album is horrible. It sounds like a guitar. And we couldn't get it to sound good. So we had to turn it way down in the mix and this and that. And I'm like, okay. And well, David, you know, has a bass player for us already. And, you know, and so it was like, now this guy just came in and just totally took over the band, basically.
So he was actually essentially sort of quasi becoming a manager at that point, like in a weird way.
Yeah, but not on paper, but yeah,
not official. Yeah, not official. Yeah.
And everything was like, well, if we don't do this, you know, we're not going to put out the album. If we don't get a new bass player, we're not going to put out the album. And the point was he knew Sterling from Incubus.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I know this really crazy bass player that would be perfect in the band. And he said, I'm going to have him come down to Tampa and you guys try him out. And if it works out, what we'll do is we'll wait until he learns the songs and we'll re-record the bass tracks.
Okay.
So that's what we were waiting on, was for Sterling came down and he joined the band. Well, Trey fired Johnny. And so we had to sit on the album and wait. And Sterling came down and learned all the songs, and we played a show at a place called the Volley Club. We played one show with Sterling. This was after that Rocky Point show that everybody's seen.
Okay, right. Mm-hmm.
But the Rocky Point show we played before he fired Johnny. We already had that booked. So after we recorded, we came back. We played the show, and me and Richard, we knew he was going to fire Johnny after the show. But we already had the show booked, and it was a huge show with Massacre and a bunch of bands. You know, everybody was playing that show, and there was probably 500-600 people there. So it was a big thing. So we didn't want to, you know, like call the whole show off. And
yeah.
So he kept Johnny in there, and then fired him right after the show. And then we got Sterling in the band, and then we did one show with him. and then the band split up after that, split in half. So yeah, it was really weird. I don't know what happened when I wasn't there that week, but it changed everything.
Well,
And then I found out that, David had fired Mike and Skeletor. Well, I think Skeletor quit, and then I guess they got rid of Mike, and David started singing, and he needed a guitar player.
This is in the band that they were in.
Yes,
that he had. Okay.
And I found out, Trey did tell me, he's like, yeah, David wanted me in his band to play guitar, but I didn't want to do that because I got my own band. So he didn't want to be in David's band, Baron Cemetery, because I guess he wasn't interested in what they were doing. I don't know what it was. I never heard any of this stuff. Right. And I do believe it was called Baron Cemetery. I don't know how the spelling was, like Baron or Baron,
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I'm pretty sure that was the name of what they were calling it.
So I mean, from an outsider standpoint, let me ask this before we do this. Do you and David speak at all? Or are you on speaking terms? You don't speak. Okay.
No, I don't speak to him.
It sounds in a lot of ways like there was a power play going on with him sort of pulling the strings and kind of trying to direct Trey to do what he wanted him to do. And Trey didn't want to join the band, but he was like, well, all right, I'll fire all these other guys. But something happened between you and Trey. We don't have to get into details, but you guys had a moment that didn't work too well, right?
Yeah, it was a stupid, girlfriend thing at the time, and we were young. So, that it did split the band up though. And Trey and Richard left and went up to North Carolina, and Sterling and I stayed here. And that's when we got Gino and did Incubus.
Okay, right. So, but the album then got kind of shelved. It didn't come out until later. It came out in 80 or 91, right?
Yeah, Earache put that out, and I didn't even know it was out. I mean, a friend of mine, I pulled into a gas station. I'll never forget this. I pulled into a gas station, and the guy that's playing drums for Nasty Savage was in the gas station, parked on the side there, and he was jamming Abominations.
Really? And
you got one of those bootlegs. I said, it sounds different though. He goes, no, I got the Earache version. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I was on Earache in Nocturnus at the time.
Nocturnus, yeah.
And he holds up the CD and shows it to me. He goes, I just bought this at Aces Records. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, I just bought this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, yeah, it's on Earache Records. And I'm like, the album I played on?
So there's the Earache version right there. Right. And
yeah, he held that up, and I was like, what's going on here? I didn't know.
Nobody ever said anything to you about it.
Nobody told me anything about it. And it was already out in the stores. That's how I found out about it.
So nobody called you and said, hey, there's going to be some residuals for this. You never saw any money from this, apparently, right?
Now, from what I understand was that Trey got paid some money, and then David sold the recordings because he owned them. He sold the recordings to Earache under the circumstances that they don't say who's in the band, that they don't have any pictures and no information in the album.
So that makes sense because that way there's less trail back to the people that actually did the recordings, you and John. Well, then was John replaced then? Was he replaced?
Ortega?
Yeah, was he replaced on the recordings?
No, that never happened.
It didn't happen. Okay.
Yeah. Now the weird thing is that if you look at most of the listings for that, it says Sterling is playing bass on that, which
but
never
he's not.
happened.
But he's not. Yeah.
That's still Johnny Ortega's tracks.
And you can hear it. There's that slippery bass line in the third track. God damn it. I'm forgetting the track names. I'll have to go back to it. But before we get to that real quick, I believe this was like the original cover, right?
Well, the thing was, I think that artwork got there after I was out because we weren't sure what we were going to have for a cover at that point when that happened. So I think Trey got this from somebody right after, or maybe right around the time that the split happened, and that's how that ended up being the artwork people said was going to be there, because it had no, we, as far as I know, we didn't have any artwork for Abominations at the time.
Okay, all right. Let me stop sharing and bring you back here. I guess where was I going there? I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought with where. Oh, so you find out that this has been released, and do you make a call to Trey and say, "Dude, what's up?" Or are you not talking at this point?
Well, at that time, I wasn't talking to Trey, and,
okay.
I called Earache, and back then we didn't have cell phones or internet, so it was very expensive to call Europe. It was like $2 a minute.
Yep. I remember.
But I did call Earache, and I talked to Dig, and Dig said, "Look, I bought the recordings from David, so you need to talk to David about it." And David's like, "Well, Earache, so it kind of was like, push the blame on this person and push the blame on this person."
Yeah.
So I don't know what the actual situation was, because I was never in on that at all.
Man, that blows. That totally blows, doesn't it? Yeah. That's crazy to think that you played on this album that, granted, everybody kind of talks about like Altars being the first album, but technically this is the first album, really, realistically.
Sure. Yeah, we had a record contract. We recorded an album. Just for the fact that it didn't get put out because of the circumstances doesn't mean it's not an album.
Of course. Yeah, yeah. So the only person that probably profited from this significantly would have been Vincent then.
Well, yeah, from what I understand is he pretty much sold the recordings to Earache and made his money back from what he spent on it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay. I believe the person that probably made the most money off of that would probably be Earache.
It would be Earache. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. So you leave there, you leave Morbid, and you then go with Sterling and Gino, I believe, for the Incubus demo, right?
Yep.
And talk a little bit about that briefly.
Well, that was a crazy band. Both of those two guys were just totally insane people, and Gino was more like just kind of crazy when he drank and stuff like that. But Sterling was certified,
mentally ill. Yeah. I mean, we should say both these guys have passed. Unfortunately, they're both not with us anymore.
Yeah. I mean, Gino ended up in jail a lot of times for fighting and stuff like that. So he was constantly in and out of jail, and that's how he ended up not being in Nocturnus too. But so yeah, the band only lasted about 6 months, and we never played a show, unfortunately. Right. And we had a house, and me and Sterling lived in the house, and Gino kind of stayed there most of the time. He kind of flopped between the house and his parents' house, and right. And so we practiced there, but we didn't ever hear Sterling sing, ever, not even once. So every time we practiced, it was an instrumental practice, and we learned the songs. We had about 6 songs down, I think, when we recorded at the end there. We did those 3. We did 3 of them, and we had a couple more. Those 3. And we had a couple more. Sterling had that band actually in Atlanta, and he said that it was before the other Incubus from New Orleans. So I don't know which one came first, but Sterling did say that he had this version of Incubus going in Atlanta before the other Incubus. But I've heard different stories, so I don't know, because I wasn't in that version of it. That was even before he joined Morbid Angel.
Right.
I don't know, but he did have all these songs written already. I mean, when he joined Morbid Angel, he said, "I want to do some of my songs and make them Morbid Angel songs if I'm going to be in the band." And Trey agreed to it. And actually, we did. There's a rehearsal tape, and the last show we did Reanimator's Mutilations live as Morbid Angel, but it was a Sterling song.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. And this stuff is really kind of it's It's pretty savage. There's some great guitar work on it, man. Gino was a good guitar player. His lead work,
he was like a heavy metal Eddie Van Halen kind of
yeah,
guy.
or Randy Rhoads. He had that real melodic sensibility but he could blaze. He could blaze pretty good. I was kind of surprised. Now, the recording itself isn't the greatest recording. It kind of, it's like comparatively speaking, I guess you'd say, but it's a demo. So obviously, you guys probably had no money to do this. Where did you record that at?
I don't, I think it was called London Music. Well, I believe that was the name of the studio. It was a little studio in Tampa, and I never even knew it existed. Sterling set up the whole thing, and he paid for it.
Okay.
So his family had some money, I guess, and he didn't work, so they were always sending him money to live. And I worked, and Gino didn't work. So I was the only one that worked in the band. But yeah, we went in the studio and did that whole thing in one night. So,
wow, really? Holy shit.
Yeah, I mean, we just went in there and knocked it out. It was like we went in there, played the songs, and then actually Sterling had me and Gino sit outside of the building, and while he did his vocals, he didn't want anybody in there but the engineer.
Wow, no kidding.
And it was only one guy in there that was recording the stuff.
Engineering, yeah.
So we sat outside and we could kind of hear him in there from the outside a little bit, but we were like, what is going on? Then we heard it and it was like, whoa, this guy is just some crazy vocals.
Yeah, it's very different. It's I would say I only listened to it once, so I'm like, yeah, I'll have to go back to that and see if I can acclimate to that. His voice is pretty out there. It's almost like a shout. It's almost like he's shouting at he's trying to be death metals, but he's also trying to be like, I'm trying to think of the word, not melodic. That's not really the word, but it's almost punky in a weird way, the way he's delivering the vocals. Yeah.
The thing was, like I said, we never heard him sing ever.
So you had no idea.
No, we had no idea what it was going to sound like. He wouldn't let us record any of the practices, even on a jam box or anything. He was very secretive about his music. And I know he did have these songs already written. He had probably had 8 or 10 songs written already, at least that I knew about.
Do you attribute that maybe to his mental state? Because unfortunately he did actually hang himself back in 2002 or something like that, 6 maybe.
Yeah, I don't remember the year either, but yeah, he did do that. Yeah, in California, I guess he hung himself with a scarf in a closet.
Yeah, you don't do that if you're mentally stable, obviously.
No,
so,
no, he really was certified crazy. I mean, he would start just walking to the post office and start fights with the next person in line next to him. And yeah, I couldn't go anywhere with the guy because I never knew what was going to end up happening being with him.
Just unstable, just kind of unstable.
Yeah. Very unstable.
Didn't you tell? You told a story on over on Vincent Crowley's show YouTube channel about Gino and Sterling getting into some vicious fight on the beach or something like that, and that was kind of the end
of the band. That was how the band ended. I went to work, and those two went to the beach and started drinking, and I guess they were trying to talk to some girls, and something happened between them two, and Gino hit Sterling and knocked him down into the dirt and ran off down the beach.
And that was the end.
And that was it.
Wow. So you guys never even did you even really get a chance to even send the demos out to have anybody listen to them?
We started to.
Okay.
Like I said, it was Sterling's, band, his name. He had all the music. He was singing. I just played drums on it.
Okay. Yeah.
And he had all the time. He had a lot of money from his parents all the time. We're sending him cash, and he was sending demos out like crazy.
Okay. He was trying to get signed then.
Oh yeah. For sure.
Okay.
And we had some big interest too at that point. So
really?
Yeah. It was starting to really, really take off.
So you maybe in a weird way, you probably looking back to you kind of feel like, man, I'm kind of glad that that ended because it was probably a little bit chaotic for you because you're
It
kind
was
of like a
really
pretty
chaotic.
you seem like a very low key guy, like not a like a happy guy. You don't seem like a dude that's like out there, or, just like that. You know what I mean? So I can't imagine that was a real pleasant experience for you looking
It
back.
wasn't. I never knew what was going to happen from one day to the next with that band. You know, it was like they got into several, arguments over things, and because Sterling wanted everything his way,
Of
and
course.
and it was like, Gino wanted things his way.
Okay.
So those two were always butting heads.
So you were always the guy in the middle, probably.
Yeah, I kind of had to, because I knew Gino. Sterling didn't really know him.
Right.
Sterling came from Atlanta, so he didn't really know anybody but me at that point.
Okay.
And he was not a person that would hang out with people at all.
Oh, so he was real isolated a lot.
Oh, yeah. He would stay in his room for days
Yeah.
sometimes. I wouldn't even see him come
Wow.
out of his room. Yeah, it was really weird. Yeah, I'd hear him in there, arguing with himself, and
Oh, okay.
crazy stuff was going on.
Okay, yeah.
You know?
Probably a blessing in disguise that ended then,
Yeah, I mean, it would have ended anyway, probably the way things were. It was
Right.
sooner or later, and it probably could have been worse than it was.
Now, when that ends, and that's kind of when you begin the process of putting a band together for Nocturnus, right?
Right. Yep.
And you brought Gino in on that, correct? Initially?
Yeah, not right at first though.
Okay.
At first, Richard Bateman was the bass player,
Right.
and he was in Agent Steel, and
That's
he was
right.
on tour. He was on tour with Agent Steel,
Okay.
and he was like, I guess John Cyrus is another one of those guys that's just like totally out there.
Very
And
difficult. Yeah.
he was halfway through the tour. Richard was like, I cannot take this guy anymore, and he just quit the band halfway through a tour.
But
And
they're a California band, right? They're California. So
Yeah.
Richard, was he from California or was he from Tampa?
No, he was from Tampa. I'm not sure how they got him in the band because that was
Okay.
before I had started
Okay.
talking to him about it. He was
Right.
already in Agent Steel, and he was on tour with them, and he said John Cyrus was just crazy and doing all these weird things on tour, and he just quit halfway through.
He still is apparently.
Yeah. Well,
From everything I've ever heard, he's still pretty difficult. Yeah.
yeah, and then so he quit, and I guess when the tour, they had to stop the tour, and they were just about ready to get signed to a major label, and I guess that messed that up. And that was they even came to Tampa looking for Richard.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, they were trying to get him back in the band, and he didn't want to join. And they even moved to Tampa for a couple months. They lived here.
Wow.
The whole band, yeah. And then they started coming after like me and Richard because I started jamming with Richard. I knew him, and I knew he had just came back and quit Agent Steel. So I was like, hey, let's put a band together. And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. And so we started jamming, just me and him, bass and drums, and that was it. But I could sing, so I was singing.
Mhm.
And then we got a guy named Vincent Crowley on guitar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Vince had a band called Entity, and they had just split up. So he had a bunch of songs. I had, me and Richard had 4 or 5 songs going at that point,
Okay.
with bass and drums. And we got Vince in the band. And so we were a 3-piece for a little while. And we had a ton of songs, just me and Richard and Vince. And Vince was playing guitar, and
Okay.
And I was singing and playing drums. And then we kind of decided we should get another guitar player. And I was kind of talking to Gino again, after things kind of calmed down.
Right.
I started talking to Gino again, and said, okay, you want to join, Nocturnus? And he's like, yeah, so he did. And he joined, and we did one little self-produced kind of demo. This guy had a friend of mine. He had a studio in his house, just an old like 16-track reel-to-reel, maybe even an 8-track reel-to-reel. I'm not sure.
So this is the 87 demo then, or the 88 Science of Horror?
This is the 87 demo.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
Gino had just gotten into the band, so he was kind of new in the situation when we did that demo.
Okay.
And then Vince couldn't take Gino. They didn't get along very well.
Oh, really? Okay.
He didn't like living in Tampa, so he moved, I believe it was to Pittsburgh, I think was the first place he moved to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so he moved from Tampa, and that just left me and Gino and Richard.
Okay.
And Gino was like, "Hey, I got a cousin named Mike Davis that plays guitar, and he's been taking a lot of lessons, and he's gotten really good." He goes, "I think we should bring him in the band." So I said, "Okay, we'll try him out." So we brought Mike Davis in the band. So that's when we did the Science of Horror demo. It was Gino, Mike Davis, me, and Richard.
Okay. That's pull that one up here.
Well, actually, no, Richard wasn't on that demo. That was Jeff Estes was playing bass. Richard, what had happened was in that amount of time after Vince left, me and Gino and Richard were playing shows, just a 3-piece, and Nasty Savage lost their bass player because he put his hand through a plate glass window and just severed a bunch of nerves in his hand, so he couldn't play bass anymore. And so they needed a bass player. They already had tours booked and everything in Poland, these big festivals they were doing already. And so Richard got the offer to do it, and he's just like, "Look, this is too good to pass up."
Yeah.
I don't blame him. We weren't even doing anything, and Gino was a hard person to work with. So, Vince left and then Richard left, and I was stuck with Gino. And that's when he's like, "Hey, let's get, my cousin in the band and Mike Davis." But Mike did get in the band, I think, right before Richard did leave.
Okay.
And then they knew Jeff Estes because they all went, Gino and Mike and Jeff and Lou all went to school together. So they all knew each other.
And this is, you talked about this briefly, but maybe you can expand on it a little bit here. You guys decided to bring a keyboardist in to essentially a sort of a technical death metal band, which was not, I don't know if it's the first, but it probably is the first. I would think you guys might have been the first death metal band that kind of did that. I know other death metal bands have used some string pads behind certain, but they didn't have like a live touring member or like a member that was an actual keyboard player. And what was the thinking there? Was that your thinking? I mean, not your thinking. That was you that wanted to do that, or was it?
Definitely, yeah. I did want keyboards in there. Not necessarily full time, but I wanted keyboards because I really wanted this new demo we were about to do. I wanted some intros, at least some intros, really cool keyboard intros. So Mike and Jeff said, "Hey, we know this guy we went to school with him. He plays keyboards, and he's got this really cool keyboard that makes all kinds of crazy sounds." and I said, "Cool." So he's like, "We'll get him to do two intros." And so he wrote the BCAD and I think Undead Journey, and then he brought him in. He brought his keyboard to our warehouse where we were practicing, and we hooked it up to the PA, really, because we had this pretty loud PA back then.
Okay.
And the big PV speakers and everything.
Oh yeah.
And so we had a pretty loud rehearsal room hooked up where we were playing. And so he brought his keyboard there and plugged it into the PA, and he played the intro for us through the PA. And then it was like, wow, this sounds great through this really big, having a keyboard player play it there live like that. And so he played it, and then it's like, okay, play that and let's go into the song and see if we could maybe even do this live. And so we did, he played the intro and we went into the song. And then while we were playing the song, he started starting to play along with some parts that he was trying to mess around with.
Right.
And like, this really sounds good.
Yeah.
And so at that point, we're like, "Hey, you want to join the band?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure."
So, and then you start actually writing new material that is kind of more focused on incorporating the keyboards at that point in time. Yeah. Just one question there. You mentioned your rehearsal spot, and in talking with Kelly a lot, were you guys in the same rehearsal space that like Crimson Glory and Atheist and all those guys were at, or no, different place?
They lived in Sarasota or Bradenton
So further south.
Yeah, they were about
Okay.
50 miles away, 40 miles away.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize it was that far. I thought it was only like 50.
Well, it was maybe 25 or 30.
Okay.
It's not real close, but it's like
Right.
you have to go from Tampa over a bridge.
Over the bridge, yep.
To St. Pete, then you got to go through St. Pete and over another bridge, and then you're in Sarasota.
Okay, got it.
It's a good little distance, but I guess they had the same. We had a few different spots in Tampa. Not at this time. We had it was public storage spaces.
Yeah, they were storage units.
There was one, after this one that we had, it was a smaller one. But we had one after that where like 100 bands were in there. It was crazy. Like Morbid Angel was in there, we were in there. Even those guys from the other Incubus, when they moved to Tampa, they were in there. Everybody you could think of that was a Tampa band was in there pretty much. And
my friend Phil here had a quick question about the Incubus thing. How many total songs did you record? Just the 3, right?
We only recorded 3, but at the time when the band split up, we had like 6 songs.
Okay, so there were others.
Oh yeah, there were several. I mean, he had more than that too.
What did Sterling end up doing? Did he do anything after that, or?
Yeah, he went back to Atlanta and put a band together there, and it wasn't called Incubus anymore. I forgot what did he call? I can't remember what it was called now.
Okay.
And Gino ended up going back up there and playing with him.
Oh, really? After the fight?
Yeah.
Oh, that's bizarre. They made up then.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know what happened because I was in Nocturnus.
But you already had Nocturnus going, so you were already out. Yeah.
Yeah. And
did they even approach you about coming and playing with them or no?
Actually, they did one time. Yeah. And I didn't. I was like, sorry, no, not me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, Nocturnus is kind of your baby.
Yeah, I had that going, and we were doing quite well. Things just kept, going forward, and I was like, no, I don't want to get back into that situation again. It was great what we did, but I didn't want to get back into that situation. And of course, it didn't last very long with Gino and him again. Yeah, I think they did a demo, and that was it.
I think we should also mention too that, watching other interviews with you, you've been a working guy since you've been a teenager, man. You've had a solid job. You're a steady kind of dude where it's like, okay, yeah, if something major happens with the band, cool. But if not, I'm going to keep this day job. Kind of like the Peter Steele story, you know what I mean? Where he was like, I don't really want to do this band thing. And, I've got a great job that's paying me well with benefits and all that kind of stuff. But you don't have that shit when you're doing a death metal band. You don't have anything to really fall back on, but your parents or.
Well, that was the thing. I made the choice once, and I had my city job, and I quit after 7 years. I quit to go on tour again because we went on tour twice, with the Key, and then, we went on tour once, and with Bolt Thrower the first time, and it was almost a month-long tour. Then we got offered the Grind Crusher tour, and my job was just like, you can't take 3 months off to go do another job, basically.
Yeah, not that kind of job. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, what do I do? So I quit my job, and I went on tour. And then, things started going crazy with Nocturnus, with the new singer after the Key and everything. And we went one tour after that, and it fell apart really quick. Everything was falling apart. And
let's talk about this one real quick, Mike, not to interrupt, but and we're at an hour and 20. Can I keep you about 2? Is that too much?
Yeah, we can.
We'll cap it right there. I promise we'll get out by then. So this album, this is an important album kind of in death metal history because it's kind of unique to everything that was going on down there around that time. And like, Atheists had their thing, which they're doing the really weird, almost like, start stop sort of crazy stuff with Roger Patterson and Steve Flynn, a killer rhythm section, and all Rand Berkey and Kelly doing their crazy guitar stuff. And then you had Death, who always had a different lineup almost every single album, obviously, for a lot of reasons we won't go into here. Most people know them anyways, but everybody's kind of different, and this album in particular really kind of stands out like the sore thumb, right? How when you get the solid lineup together, did you guys already have all the songs ready and locked in and locked tight? And is this the first time you're in Morrissound, or had you been going there other times before you actually recorded there?
No, the Key was the first time I was in Morrissound.
Okay.
We had about, maybe 60-70% of the songs when we got signed to Earache. And so we only had to write a few more songs, which was stuff like the last few songs, like Destroying the Manger, Empire of Sands, Droid Sector. Those are the stuff we did after the demo. As it got more technical and more technical because, well, Gino, of course, went to jail again. And so he was out of Nocturnus. And Sean McNinney, he actually lived like 4 or 5 houses down on the same street as Mike.
Okay.
So they were jamming together all the time, just at each other's houses. And so Sean already knew a lot of the songs. Mike had showed him all the songs that we were playing and how to play them. And so it was very easy to get Sean in the band. And Sean was another person that actually knew all those guys as well.
Okay, so it was all tied in, intermingled.
Yeah, Sean and Lou and Mike and Jeff all knew each other. I was the only one that didn't know these guys.
Oh, okay. So they kind of so that kind of makes sense as to what happens after the second album. Then now I see it. Okay.
Yeah, I was older than them, and
right.
I didn't know any of them prior to that second Nocturnus, 1987.
Right.
Well, yeah, 87 when Mike joined, late 87. But in 88, when everybody else joined, Lou and everybody, I didn't know any of those guys at all. I'd never even met them before.
Who did the artwork on the first album? I don't honestly know.
Dan Seagrave.
Oh, that was a Seagrave. Okay.
Yeah.
So I always ask this. You don't have to tell me if you don't want, but I'm kind of curious what that original budget was for that first album.
Well, it was $10,000.
Okay. And you're at Morrissound now. Morrissound is building this rep, had been building this rep for probably 5, 6, 7 years, and 6 years probably, right? And
yeah,
but you didn't know any of the guys. You didn't know Tom or Jim or Scott or anything, right? Until you went in.
I knew Scott kinda,
okay.
from who he was working with, stuff like that, but I didn't really know Tom or Jim at all. And I knew of them, of course. Especially I knew Jim from that he had done the Nasty Savage records, and right. Tom had Morbid Angel.
Right.
So it was
Crimson Glory.
Right. So it was with Earache, when we signed to Earache, they were like, well, you're definitely going in Morrissound, and you're definitely going to use Tom Morris because Tom Morris did Morbid Angel. So he's going to do
okay.
So that's kind of work. Tom did Tom's a fantastic engineer.
Yeah.
But I kind of like the way, and Scott, of course, there's no refuting his level. Exactly. He's amazing too.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I really liked Jim Morris's sound on the Nasty Savage records. It had this really big, not that Morbid Angel didn't sound big either, but
right.
But he had this particular sound that I just, especially the drums and stuff like that, the way it sounded, I really liked his engineering style.
Yeah.
And I asked Dig, I said, why can't we use, Jim Morris? And he's like, no, you're going to use Tom because we're paying for it, and because Tom did Morbid Angel. So
I believe, didn't Jim do the primary engineering and producing on the Transcendence? I think he did.
I'm not sure.
That has one of the most massive room sounds ever. I mean, that production is insane.
I haven't heard that album in a long time, but
yeah. I mean, the production on the Key is quite good. I think it's quite good.
Well, it suffered a lot because, for one thing, we weren't really that prepared to go in there like we could have been.
Okay.
My drum set was horrible. It was like literally kind of falling apart, and I didn't have the money or the budget to really buy a whole new drum set.
Okay.
And my drums were what you call concert toms,
Mm-hmm.
which had no bottom heads.
Yes. I know what you're talking about. Yep.
I had no idea, but here's the thing: you don't do that in the studio.
Okay. Yeah.
When I brought that drum set in the studio, Tom was like, "This is probably the worst sounding drum set I've ever heard." The drums were huge, and they had no bottom heads, and he had a hard time miking it and getting it to sound the way he wanted the drums to sound.
So you triggered a lot then? I would imagine a lot of drums were triggered.
No triggering back then.
Really?
Yeah, this was not done on Pro Tools. This was done on a 24-track SSL board with reel to reel. This was done on reel to reel, 2-inch reel to reel.
2-inch tape. Yeah. Okay. I thought for some reason they were triggered. Okay. Interesting.
No, this was, I mean, there's reverb and stuff on the snare and all that,
Sure.
There's some effects on it, but no, there was no triggering back then.
Okay. Cool. That's interesting.
Yeah. That's why, I mean, the drums, if they had been put in Pro Tools and reworked like everybody does these days, they would have sounded perfect. Like everybody else's stuff sounds perfect now.
Right.
But that's besides the point. I mean, but the thing was, here's the thing that really suffered with the key was that Tom came out about the week before we were going to go in and record. He wanted to hear, because he didn't even know who we were. He'd never heard our stuff before or anything. So he came out to the warehouse to hear us, play some of the songs that we're going to be recording. And so we're playing the songs for him. And after we played a song, he stopped. He's like, Jeff, he said to the bass player, he said, Jeff, can you play that bass part there in the middle? And Jeff was like, well, man, he was a bad drinker at the time.
Oh, okay.
And he was all kind of buzzed, and he tried to play the bass part that Tom wanted him to, and he kept messing it up in front of him by himself. He got called out, and he didn't handle it very well. And he was just like flubbing it up. And the more he tried to play it by himself,
the worse it got.
Worse. And he took his bass, he put it down and walked out in front of Tom, walked out of the warehouse, just walked out. And we're sitting there looking at Tom Morris going, uh-oh, what's going on? What do we just get ourselves into? And Tom's looking at us. He goes, are you guys ready to record an album next week? And we're like, well, we're going to do what we can,
Oh,
and then Jeff disappears. We don't hear from him at all. Can't find him. He had a Volkswagen van, and he lived in it pretty much most of the time.
Oh, wow.
He used to park it in his parents' front yard and just live in it.
Okay.
So he disappeared. He had a girlfriend he was fighting with. He disappeared. We didn't hear from him at all. We had no idea if he was even going to show up to record the record.
Holy shit. Yeah. And this is pre-cell phone, right? Still?
Oh yeah. Pre-internet, pre-cell phone. So we show up in the morning, not even sure if Jeff's going to be there or not. And Jeff's in the parking lot before we are.
Okay.
In the middle of Morrissound parking lot, fighting with his girlfriend with a half 6-pack, how you got the plastic 6-pack things. He's half of it's gone. He's sitting there hanging on to 2 beers left. He's already, who knows how much he's already drank. He's fighting with his girlfriend in the middle of Morrissound parking lot. And he goes inside, he tries to play some songs, and he can't do it, and he leaves again. And it was just like, now we're in Morrissound. We got a $10,000 budget, which is basically 2 weeks in Morrissound, pretty much at the time.
Okay.
And like, what are we going to do? We don't even have a bass player now. So we had to record the songs with me and just Mike and Sean. So we kind of just winged through the songs. There was no, I've never played the click tracks anyway, but you didn't have Pro Tools. You didn't have that kind of stuff going on. So we just literally got in the room, and they stood in the control room, and I watched them through the glass, and we played the songs, and no bass at all. And then we laid down the guitar tracks, the rhythm guitar tracks. And after that, Mike went into this small little room they had in Morrissound and started learning the bass parts.
Okay.
he ended up playing the bass on the key. So
really, so Jeff's not even on it. How about that? That's
what he
interesting.
did try to do was not even salvageable. So Mike had to go in and redo every bit of that album. And of course, Jeff, when he did play good, he was playing good when he did play good.
Okay.
But and he sounded more like a bass player. Well, Mike, sounded like a guitar player playing bass.
Was he a finger style or was he a pick?
Oh no, he had. Jeff played with his fingers most of the time.
Okay, which is a very different sound than
exactly
a plectrum. Yeah.
So Mike had to pretty much play guitar bass, and figure out. Well, he wrote, a lot of this newer songs too. He wrote most of the guitar parts, so it was not real hard for him to do, to figure out the bass parts towards it because he knew them pretty much already from showing them to Jeff.
Right.
But he couldn't play like Jeff was playing exactly, of course, like a bass.
So it gave a different feel for you in terms of, that's just, man, have you ever told that story before? Like,
I think I have, but the thing, like the bass was added almost last.
Yeah. Which is unusual.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't put in there when I did the drum tracks.
So your guy, now you said you're not playing to a click. So you're really, man, that how hard was that to do with no real guide, like from a rhythm standpoint? You're doing it all from here, right?
Well, they didn't play leads. We pretty much, well, I think they actually on the scratch tracks, I think they did some leads too, just to keep placements of times. But being that I was also singing, I kind of knew the songs patterns pretty well, like when things go and stop and leads and stuff like that. So, so it was kind of tough though. I mean, plus the keyboards weren't put in yet either.
Okay. So were they the last thing? Were they the last thing that was put on, or?
No, probably the bass was probably the last thing.
Oh, you said that. Yeah, you just said that. Yeah.
From what I remember. So, because we had to add that in later, and that's why it's mixed really low on the album.
Yeah, to kind of bury it.
Yeah. So, it was kind of like a disaster. Tom hated the sound of my drums. I didn't even have I didn't get any advance money to buy new drum heads.
To buy a new set. Yeah. Wow.
Some of the cymbals were not in great shape, and the drums, like I said, there were concert toms. They aren't meant to be recording drums.
Yeah.
And Tom said, when you come in to do your second record, we are renting you
a drum set. Yeah.
And that's what we did on Thresholds. There was a brand new a Yamaha kit sitting on the floor in there, and I had to put it together in one day and play.
Oh wow!
The songs in 2 days. I did the songs in 2 days, that day and the next day.
Well, real quick question here. Somebody's asking about Mike. Mike, you don't have any contact with him, I believe, right?
I haven't talked. He moved from Tampa. He's not. He wasn't a real sociable person. He had his group of friends, and that was it.
Right.
And he really didn't like. I don't think he liked living in Tampa that much in the first place. And he sold his house and moved upstate Florida on some property where he has land and stuff like that. From what I've heard, since he moved, actually, we jammed together a few times in the 2000s, early 2000s, after they did that Ethereal Tombs and all that. Me and him got together a few times, and he was trying to put a new project together, and I told him I'd play drums on it, no problem.
Okay.
And we did. We started working on songs, but then he ended up moving. So I after he moved, I don't think hardly anybody that I know knows how to contact him. He kind of just disappeared.
Well, there you go. He's not. He's not really. Right. Yeah. So with the Key, you get offered this tour with Bolt Thrower because they're a earache band, right?
Right.
And that's U.S. tour or European tour?
That was a European tour.
A European. Okay. So, I mean, that's a pretty big deal for a guy that's 20. How are you? 24, 25?
Yeah, I think I was 24 maybe. Yeah.
Okay. And that you said that you quit your job to kind of facilitate doing this, right? Or was that later? Was that Thresholds?
That was during the Key.
That was during the key. Okay. How'd that go overall?
Oh, the tour went great.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, almost every show is you can find it on YouTube.
But I mean, as from a perspective of like camaraderie and getting along and all that kind of stuff, or were there some fracture points already developing, or no?
I don't know. I mean, that one seemed to go pretty well. And well, the thing was, here's the one thing that happened. Well, of course, with Jeff, he was out of the band after that.
Of course, yeah.
So we had to find a bass player, and we tried out a bunch of people, and I don't know. It wasn't so much me. It was like, you know, both guitar players had to be happy with who we picked,
Right.
More than me, I think.
Right.
And we found one guy that was living in South Florida, named Jim Sullivan. We didn't know him or anything like that, but we had to find somebody because we had this tour booked and everything. So we had to get somebody right away, because right after the key came out, we went right out on tour. And we knew about the Grind Crusher tour too. So it was like we had 2 tours back to back almost, and we didn't have a bass player. So we had to find
somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a deadline. And so we found this guy, Jim, and we got him, and he practiced with us for a couple weeks. He was kind of weird. We figured, you know, yeah, this guy's a little strange, but let's do it. And so we did the tours with him, and he was really weird when we went out on tour. He would talk to himself, have these conversations with himself. He was
wow.
like, yeah, he was like, yeah, you know, he would just sit there and ramble on and talk to nobody and answer himself too, you know, things like that. And
okay, that's odd.
Yeah, he was not one of us for sure, you know.
Okay, all right,
So
yeah,
after the tours, you know, we let him go, and we got another guy, Chris, to come in and play the bass on Thresholds.
Right.
Who was a really good friend of Lou's, and so he played the bass, but he didn't want to tour. He didn't want to join the band, and he didn't want to tour.
He didn't want to be out on the road. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Chris Sluter. And he's a fantastic bass player, but he didn't really want to do that kind of stuff. So that's when we got Emo. You know, we found him to do the tour. The last tour that we did for Thresholds was with Confessor.
Okay. Now, when you do Thresholds, things are a little bit different when you go in now. I mean, now when you go in to do this, when you're doing it again with Tom at Morrissound again, and you know, when you guys finished that, it didn't perform as well as the key, which really did the key perform? Like, were you kind of shocked at how well it sold, or were you?
Yeah, we really were. I mean, it shot out there. It sold like 70,000 copies. You know,
really
back then. I mean, Morbid Angel was selling over 100. So was Death.
That's a lot of albums, though, man, to shift like that back then. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it did way better than we thought it would, and Earache did too. And they're like, and that's why they were like, look, if you guys get a vocalist, and they said to me, either quit playing drums and get out front and sing, or play drums and get a front man, because you guys need a front man. You need somebody out front getting the crowd going, because the stage show was basically nothing. There was no stage show at all.
Yeah. Because you're focused on drumming and trying to sing, which is not easy. Yeah.
Well, I know, but I mean, and I had a huge drum set, so people couldn't see me. You know, so many people said, "Man, the first time I saw Nocturnus, all I saw was this band up there playing, and this vocalist coming, and I couldn't tell where the vocals were coming from."
Okay, I see.
And it was like, well, yeah, you know.
How'd you feel about that? How'd you feel about them making that request?
Well, I was like, look, we're doing great. It's not broke. We don't need to fix anything.
Okay.
But here, you know, Earache actually gave us an ultimatum and said, look, if you don't get a singer, or if you don't sing and get a drummer, then we're going to cut your budget, and we're not going to give you a video. And at that time, MTV had Headbangers Ball.
Huge thing. Yep.
And it was a huge thing to have a video. And Earache said, no video if you don't have a front man. we're not going to spend the money on a video to film you back there behind your drum set.
It was all about appearances.
Right. And
Yeah.
and Dream Theater was getting huge.
Dream Theater, Fates Warning, all those
Right.
prog metal bands. And I assume, I heard you speak to it maybe with Vincent again, that in a sense they were maybe not they, but maybe internally even the thinking was, let's start moving towards a more commercial style of prog metal, because you guys were kind of technical death prog in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah. And that, you know, everybody was getting in their heads, the keyboard player, Lou especially, you know, we could make so much money, you know, like if we went all science fiction and went into and did this and that. And, you know, we got away from the satanic stuff completely. And I'm like, well, it's, you know, it could work, but it's a gamble. But what we have now was working.
Yeah.
And so being the fact that we all signed the contract with Earache, it wasn't just like I signed it or, you know, one person signed it.
It was a band.
Yeah, we signed it separately. So if anything happened, Earache could take each one of us separately with whatever we do after.
Oh, okay. All right.
So when it came so when it came to doing thresholds, they were like, you know, this is going to have to be a majority type vote with whether we get a front man or not.
Okay. And you were the odd man out.
I was the only one that said, let's keep it the way it is.
Yeah.
And everybody else is like, nope. I want to write music. I want to make more money. You know, I want to, you know, be part of writing the vocals. And
were any of those guys working jobs, like regular jobs? Or were they just doing like periodic stuff?
Yeah, no, they were work.
Okay.
Lou was like a cook at Ruby Tuesdays, and Sean, I forgot what he was doing. He had a job too, but Mike didn't have a job. And well, we never really had a steady bass player. So
right.
But I was working, and then I had quit, you know, and then when I quit, everything started falling apart in the band, and I was like,
you were able to get your job back though when you.
Well, I did after the band split up.
Oh, well, this was after. So we'll talk briefly about that. You don't have to go into like super detail, but what happened after Thresholds comes out? It doesn't perform as well. It's a little. It's funny you say Dream Theater. I hear a lot of Metallica. I hear a lot of And Justice for All and the riffs and kind of Ride the Lightning stuff. So it's not real. It's thrashy, but it's kind of, you know, the keyboards make it more of a prog sort of thing. Yeah. But yeah, and then you get this guy Dan Izzo in, right?
Right.
How many vocalists did you guys?
I don't know, probably 5 or 6 people, but being the way I would write and sing it at the same time, I kind of sing differently than most people do. And I sing more with the drums than with the melodic guitar parts.
Right.
And it was so weird when people came out to try out for us. They were getting lost in the songs, like they were having a really hard time singing along with the rhythms.
Right.
And just kind of came in.
I could see that. Yeah.
It was difficult. People were like, you know, they weren't catching what we were doing.
Right.
And the way it was styled, it's kind of like a chanting more than a singing.
It is.
It goes along with the rhythm more than the melody.
Right.
So Dan kind of came in and just nailed it, and his voice wasn't real far off from mine.
It really wasn't. It was maybe a little bit more gritty, like in a Hetfield way or something like that, kind of.
A little bit more gruff than mine, you know.
Right.
And I don't know. I guess you could say mine back then was more of a little bit of a black metal almost style, you know?
Yeah, it was like a shouty black metal sort of thing. Like you said, I mean, you know this, Mike. The one thing that a lot of people do kind of criticize the Key for is the vocals, because they're very different than really what was kind of happening. But it was now that you say that, it's like, yeah, that's it. It was more like a rhythmic chant to the drums versus a melodic follow the guitars sort of thing, or keyboards. Right. Yeah.
And I was even doing that in Morbid Angel, because
you were,
you know, a lot of this stuff were actual chants out of the Necronomicon that Trey put in there.
Right.
So when I'm chanting, you know, actual lines out of the Necronomicon in Morbid Angel, I'm chanting along with the drums, and bam, bam, that worked that way. So when I got into Nocturnus, I just kind of kept that same style and kept it going.
So, did you do much touring for Threshold?
No, one tour with Confessor, and
Oh, that was the one.
that was it.
Any festival type things or anything like that? Nothing.
Now we did a warm up for the Dynamo, but that was pretty much the biggest one we did.
And anything locally? Were you able to do anything locally or no?
Yeah, we did a show before we left, which was the one we used to film that video.
So like a warm up show.
Yeah, it was like a warm up show, and then we went on tour, and then after that, there was no more shows.
So when you guys get back from that, I mean, the way you tell it in Vincent's stream is you kind of go into practice one day and everybody's just sort of sitting there like this, and they drop the bomb on you that, hey, by the way, you're not in your band anymore, the one that you started.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's exactly. And we hadn't even started practicing it. We got off that tour and we were actually supposed to show back up to start setting up our equipment again to start practicing again.
Right.
And, maybe starting to write another album. Mm-hmm. And even when we did, we did, what was it? We did Grid Zone on the Key tour. So I was actually singing one of the songs from Thresholds. So I was supposed to be singing on Thresholds. So, because Grid Zone, we did as an encore on the Key tour.
Okay.
So, after that, though, the third album we were going to start writing that. We had a couple songs already that we were messing around with. Possess the Priest was one. And that's an actual old Nocturnus song from 1987.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Me and Bateman came up with that song. And Gino added guitar to it, and Vince, I think he was on that too. He added some of the guitar probably back then, but we had a song called Possess the Priest. And so we were going to redo that song anyway. And then there was another one, Mummified, that we were working on So yeah, when I walked into the warehouse to set my drums back up, they were like, well, we got something to tell you. And they did. They had their heads down like this, and they wouldn't even look me in the face.
No shit.
Like, well, we think it'd be better. And the thing was, they knew that I was going to play drums for Asheron anyway.
Yeah, you'd reconnected with Vincent before then, right?
Yeah, he even got a warehouse in the same thing. It was 2 doors down from our warehouse.
Right.
And it was another. I think I had another smaller little drum set that I was going to use in there, to practice. And
were you just doing that to record an album with him, or were you going to actually start another band with him, or no?
Well, we weren't sure what was going to come of it, but I told him I would do the drums on the next album.
Okay, right.
So, we just kind of took it from there, and ended up doing 2 CDs and a 7-inch after that.
Yeah, we'll get to that real quick. We'll wrap with that because we did talk about the new album, and we'll mention it real quick at the end here, just so people know. Well, actually, we'll just do it now. So, Unicursal just came out May 17th, I believe, on Profound Lore.
I think it was the 19th.
Might have been the 19th. Sorry, I don't have I'm memorizing that.
Me too.
And that's on Profound. I'm pretty sure it was the 17th. That came out on Profound Lore, and it's a killer album. Musically, it's insane. There's just so much. If you really love the Key, you're gonna love this album because it's got that energy and that kind of vibe to it, but it's different in it of its own right, but we'll come back to that at the end real quick because I want to get Asheron in real fast and get you out of here. So you are basically like, what the fuck? Okay, you're out the door at that point of your band that you started. Was there somebody in the band any particular person in the band that kind of had sort of assumed the leadership role?
It was definitely Lou.
It was Lou. Okay. All right.
Yeah. He stole my name. He knew that I I never trademarked the name because we were signed to a label. We had albums out in stores.
Right.
This is when you had record stores in every mall, and our record was in every mall. Yeah. So everybody knew that Nocturnus was Nocturnus. There was nobody that I could ever think that wasn't in the band that could have stolen that name at that point. Nobody could have done it. Just like that'd be ludicrous. Just like somebody going, I'm in Morbid Angel now, a band called Morbid Angel now.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to do that.
Yeah.
You know,
But but you were a young guy, man. I mean, you probably didn't even envision that unity would suddenly, you know, but unfortunately, did you have a manager back then, or were you self-managing?
No, we never had a manager.
See, if you'd had a manager, you'd probably been like, "Hey, Mike, you need to trademark this or something." You know what I mean? It probably would have come to that. Yeah.
Well, because we had product out, I didn't think you had to at that point because, like I said, who was going to steal that? I mean, there's no other people outside of the band that could have done it.
But that's who stole your name, the band.
Right. So they knew that, and I didn't think that anything like that would ever. I didn't even think it would be possible because I came up with the name. I came up with the design of the logo, how I wanted it to look, everything.
Oh, man.
And you know, none of those guys were even in the band in the beginning.
Of course. It was a completely different band from the beginning. Yeah.
So I never thought something like that would happen.
Man, that had to have pissed you off like beyond belief.
You know, it did, but because everybody wanted to be the next, you know, Dream Theater, and they wanted to make money. And like when we were on the Confessor tour, one morning I heard a scuffling outside the bus, and I looked out there, and Mike Davis and Lou were on the ground punching each other, fighting, and every night they were getting in arguments, and I was hating being on tour with those guys at the end.
Yeah, you mentioned there was a lot of partying going on. You don't seem to be, at least through what I've seen in your interviews, you didn't seem to be much of a big time partier either.
I mean, I've done my things in life, no doubt, but I'm not really a drinker.
Okay.
And those guys, and I never smoked cigarettes, and those guys, just the whole bus was just full of cigarette smoke and beer cans every night. And they would just get drunk and loud and, you know, like, and start arguing with each other and just.
So you can't even sleep back in your bunk because it's.
Yeah, I would just go in my bunk by myself and try to go to sleep, but they would be up all night, like, you know, just drinking and smoking. And like I said, that one morning I was already asleep, and I woke up and they were still up.
Oh, you know, wow.
And they were outside of the bus rolling on the ground, punching each other.
What the fuck?
I mean, full-fledged fighting. And I'm like, man, you know, this is terrible.
Yeah. So in a weird way, when you got that news, was there it couldn't have been a sense of relief because it was your band that you started.
Well, it was a weird situation. It almost.
Uh-oh. Mike, I lost you. Mike. Uh-oh. Mike, you're frozen. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know what happened. Oh, there you are. You're back. Okay. You were frozen for a long section there. Sorry.
Yeah, we lost the internet somehow. Or something happened.
So
but I really wasn't happy. I was
in the band. You weren't happy in the band. Okay. All right.
I didn't like, it was like I wasn't friends with any of these guys anymore. They, you know, it was.
So you ended up pretty much moving your drums 2 doors down over to the Asheron thing. And then that's how the Asheron thing came about. And I guess Vincent had a lot of songs, right? And ready to go. Where were you?
Including some old Nocturnus songs that were his.
Okay.
So when he left Nocturnus in '87, the songs that he had written, which were, some of them were Entity songs. One was even called The Entity and was on that first Nocturnus demo. Those 2 of those songs on the first Nocturnus demo were Vince's songs, and 2 of them were me and Bateman's songs.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of like we were splitting everything. Every time, you know, we'd come up with a song, Vince would pull out one of his old songs, or we'd start working on new ones, things like that. So when he left, he took all those songs with him, and they became Asheron songs.
Okay.
So when I got in Asheron, then they became Asheron songs with me playing drums on them, like I did in Nocturnus.
Funny story real quick about Asheron. I didn't really know who that band was until I went to Maryland Death Fest back in 16 maybe. So obviously you weren't in the band at that point in time, I don't believe. But no. I'll tell you something, man. Like, Vince scared the fuck out of me just from the crowd. He scared me. He's an imposing dude. He's big, tall, fit. He's very, you know, like kind of yoked, you know, as they say, you know, like I guess he works out. I don't know, or he did then. But I remember him coming off the stage. Well, first of all, I remember him talking a lot about Satan, and I was like, as a Catholic who is an atheist, he still like it was kind of scary to me. I'm like, fuck, man, this dude's like serious. So I didn't really know about his background until I looked him up like later that night. I'm like, who is this Asheron band? And he came out in the audience and he was standing next to me. I'm not a tall guy. I'm only 5'8", you know. So he's like, he's got to be like 6'3" or something. He's like a big,
he's tall. He's big.
Yeah. So he kind of scared the fuck out of me. So it was weird when I came around to doing all this research. I'm like, wait a minute, Mike was in that band? I didn't know that. So it's kind of funny. Now you were on, what were you on? Just so I know. Were you on Rights?
Well,
no, after that.
Yeah, I was Lex Talionis, and
right.
Hail Victory, or it was called Satanic Victory in Europe, and it was called Hail Victory over here because some label didn't like the Hail thing, HA, but it's not Heil, it's Hail.
Hail, yeah.
It wasn't meant to be anything like that. It was just Hail Victory, you know that, and so they kind of liked Satanic Victory better for Europe. So it had two different titles, and then there was a Ala Exul, kind of like it was like a little 7-inch thing that we did as well.
Yeah, real quick, I'll pull this up and show it real fast here. And Mike, I really want to thank you for all this time. I really appreciate it very much. And there's some very interesting questions coming up here in the chat. I'll try to hit real quick. So this is Lex Talionis, which I gotta be honest with you, I've not heard. I don't know this band that well. So where did you record this at?
We did that at Audio Lab in Tampa.
And that's like a pretty nice studio, right?
Well, yeah, it changed. At first it was actually a small thing in those warehouses I was telling you about, that there was a whole bunch of bands in there.
Right.
Probably somewhere close to, I wouldn't say 100 really, actually, like I said before, but there was probably at least 50 bands in there, and it was huge. There were rows, and every row had bands in it. It was great. You could just drive around and just see just about anybody in Tampa play. Right. But right in the middle, there was like a middle building, and they had a studio in there, and Audio Lab was in there.
Oh, wow.
Actually, after Audio Lab left there and got their own building outside of there, Eric Rattan moved in there with his studio.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. The earliest version of Eric Rattan's studio was in that same building that Audio Lab was in.
That's nuts, man. That's crazy. More or less like a storage unit.
Yeah, it was.
Okay. How about that? That's crazy.
Yeah.
So the Asheron stuff, you're in there with Vince. And it's you and Vince. Who's Vincent Breeding?
He was a guitar player that was in Tampa that we knew, and he was in the Genitortures for a little while too.
With Vincent.
Yeah, so he actually knows David Vincent as well.
Okay.
But this was earlier on. He was in some vampire kind of band at first, like that was, I forgot what they were called, but Vince had been talking to him, and we actually had Tony Black, who's in several bands. He was in Massacre for a little while, Tony. So
right,
he's been in several bands, and that was his first band, was Asheron as well. So Tony was in the band, and then Vince Breeding was in the band, and in the beginning Pete Slate was in the band before Vincent Breeding was in the band. Okay. Now, the tie-in, I'm going to ask a question. If you don't want to answer it, that's fine. I'm curious about this, but you don't have to answer it. You mentioned like early on that you were interested in the I can't say the word Necronomicon.
I always want to say Necrominiacon. I don't know why, but I want to add extra syllables in there. So you were into that. You were into sort of the Levian sort of thing, the Levian sort of satanic stuff. I'm an atheist personally, but where do you lie in that whole thing? I mean, Vincent was in the Church of Satan, right? He was actually a high-ranking member, I believe, right? Or leader.
On Lex Talionis, between each song is a little keyboard thing with a guy doing the 9 satanic statements.
Okay.
that's Peter Gilmore, who actually runs the Satanic Church now.
That's right. Okay, so after LeVay died, right?
Right.
Where do you stand on religion? Not religion, but I don't know what else to call it. A belief system, I guess.
You know, when I was younger, you know, of course, I was, you know, the total evils, satanic stuff was interesting me big time, and the Necronomicon as well. And I knew a guy that owned an occult bookstore in Tampa. And it was called Merlin's, and he actually showed me a lot of stuff and kind of keyed me into. He knew the people that wrote the Necronomicon.
Really?
He knew who Simon was, and and of course now everybody does too, as Peter Levenda, who actually owned the Magical Child bookstore in New York. Well, he was part owner,
okay,
or part partners in it, I should say. But I went to that store one time too and bought some really cool Baphomet's. I mean, a Zuzu statue, which I still have. But yeah, he was friends with all these guys. He was a huge Golden Dawn member. And so he kind of, you know, showed me a lot of the real magical stuff that was real.
Okay.
And of course, he wasn't that much into the Satanism thing. Richard, that owned Merlin's books, he was more into real occultism, like Aleister Crowley type stuff.
The Crowley stuff. Yeah. The magic type stuff.
What happened with me was I didn't want to follow any one particular thing, because I'm not a follower. You know, so I don't want to follow any one particular thing.
Right.
And so what I kind of thought of, and this is what really got me one time, Bruce Lee was saying that he learned many styles of
karate,
kung fu,
jiu-jitsu, all that stuff. Yeah.
All of it. And he put it all together. He learned a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and he put it all together into his own style.
I see.
And that's basically the way I look at the occult is that I took stuff from this, I took stuff from this, I took stuff from this, and I kind of put my own whole system together of
belief system,
of what I believe things are.
Okay.
And not that that's right and everybody else is wrong or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's just personally the things that I found most interesting. I took a little bit of this and that. And there's a guy that was a student of Aleister Crowley's named Kenneth Grant.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, Grant wrote some fantastic books, and he did the same thing. He even took some Lovecraft and you know, things like that, and Golden Dawn, and he was a successor of Aleister Crowley, almost ran the OTO almost. And he had his own group, and they did a lot of Typhonian magic, which was, you know, had a little bit more Egyptian stuff like Set. You know, the god Set and things like that.
Right? Seth. Yeah.
And so I kind of like, after reading his books, I was like, this is, you know, the way to do things. You take little things from different systems of magic and you kind of put your own whole thing together, and it works. That's what works best for you.
For you, right? As opposed to, and I think the other funny thing is, like, I'm not delved deep into it, to be very honest with you. I guess it's probably my upbringing as a Catholic that never went to church, but you know how the Catholic Church guilts you into everything. So it's like, you don't want to think about these things, just avoid them. You know what I mean? But if you really look into Satanism, the whole God Satan thing, the dynamic there is kind of silly in a lot of ways. Satanism really isn't steeped in evil. It's more steeped in, my understanding of it is, it's more steeped in kind of this do as thou wilt sort of thing,
which came from Crowley, actually.
Which came from, I'm sorry,
Aleister Crowley.
right. Which, and I mean, the reality of it is, we all know if you really look into Crowley, it was kind of like the hedonism thing in a lot of ways. It was like just,
yeah, he did have a lot of that as well. But you know, even Kenneth Grant was like, he didn't like some of the things that Crowley was into. So he didn't want to be a follower exactly either, even though he was a student of his.
The more perverted side of things, I guess we could put it. Yeah.
Well, he looked at magic. What people talk about, the left-hand path all the time. they don't really know what that is, because the left-hand path isn't the evil black magic path. It's left-hand path comes from tantric Indian, Middle Eastern Indian type stuff, and tantra. It's the left-hand path is sexual magic, and it's sexual magic between a male and a female. It's not,
Right.
and the left hand is female and the right hand is male. So left-hand path actually stands for magical workings with a female.
Okay. Feminine magic, I guess, right?
Well, no, not feminine magic.
Or feminine sexual magic? No, sexual magic.
Yeah, it means you have to have both to create.
Oh, I lost your volume there.
Oh, sorry, I had a text coming.
Yeah, a call. Yeah.
Basically, that you have to have both to create.
Okay. Yeah. Well, obviously, yeah, sure.
Right. But there's a lot. But when you think about that, you create life with both, right? So when it comes to magical workings, it's the same thing. It elevates the woman as a priestess, and the value that has in its own right, and the male is the priest. So you have this dichotomy of things, of course, but they have to work together to create something.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it's weird. You mentioned Lovecraft, and I always thought the I can't say that damn word.
Necronomicon.
Thank you. I cannot say that fucking word. I don't know why it is. It's like there's a weird impasse in my brain. But I always thought that was Lovecraft that wrote that, but it's not, right?
The Necronomicon. Well, he mentions it. So, yeah, he was the first to mention a book called the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
So what these people did that own the magical child was they took real Sumerian texts.
Oh.
And they created a Necronomicon.
Oh, okay. So H.P. Lovecraft was referencing something that didn't really actually exist at the time?
Well, he said that it did, and basically it probably did exist in its own type of form of back then they didn't have books, they had wax cylinder seals.
Right.
And most of Sumerian tablets are like a wheel. And you can roll it out, and it makes the cylinder, the not papyrus, but the I forgot what you call it, but it makes the thing you can read, like a tablet.
Right, like a scroll, like a scroll. Yeah.
And so the Sumerian was all that. There was never actually a book, but there was a lot of Sumerian text that refers to a lot of things that Lovecraft did talk about.
Okay, so he was clearly, Lovecraft was clearly interested in the occult like that, so he knew about these Sumerian texts, I would assume, right? Because that's kind of where the Cthulhu mythos sort of creeps out to some extent.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's brilliant, man. I wish I want to get you out of here because I've already lied to you here about getting out of here too. So let's try to wrap up real quick. Asheron, did you do any touring with Asheron?
No, not really. I think they did a tour after me because they were going to do a tour. And again, I had just got my job back. And I still have that same job now. So
you're kind of like, I don't know if I want to do this again.
Yeah, I told him, I said, I don't want to do, I can't leave again for like 3 weeks. And back then it was literally like no money involved in it either.
Yeah. You're not making anything. You're just playing.
Yeah. So I was like, I can't do that. Sorry. If you want to get another drummer to do the touring and you still want to keep me, that's fine. If you don't, and you need to get somebody that's in the band full time that can tour, I understand, but I can't do it. So that's basically, how it went.
Yeah. And I mean, that's being pragmatic and smart.
Yeah.
And you're probably at this time, you're in your 30s now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when real life starts hitting you. You're not in your 20s anymore. And you have the pipe dreams of, well, all right, we'll just go out and party. And if we get home with a couple $100 in our pocket, cool. But once you're, that level, and I assume, I don't know, had you bought a house yet, or were you living by yourself?
No, not at that point. I had my own apartment. but I was saving for a house at that point.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I did end up getting.
So you're being pragmatic and smart at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I moved back home one time, which was after the thing happened in Nocturnus in '92, and I was like, I can't, I was home for maybe a couple of months till I got another job. Before I got my job back, I had another job for a little while, which was taking care of Rottweilers, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I was at a dog, not
sanctuary,
kennel, but it was where they bred Rottweilers.
Oh, breeding. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I worked at a place that did that, and they sold Rottweilers, real German Rottweilers.
Is that what your dog is, a Rottweiler?
No, not this one. I've had a few.
Okay.
But yeah, so yeah, you're talking a long time ago. So.
Yeah, right. I know.
But
we're old, dude. We're old.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to live at home. I wanted my own house. I wanted, cars. I wanted things in life, and you can't do that if you're not in a really big metal band and doing it like 12 months out of the year. And I kind of didn't really want to do that either.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned too in the Vincent thing, you mentioned that it was never your real purpose to go out there and become like money. It wasn't about the money. It was more about the creative stuff and the experience of, being in the creative space to create music and tour a little bit. Yeah. And that's a pretty admirable thing, Mike. I mean, a lot of guys go into it and they're like, oh yeah, man, I just want to become a rock star. And you don't go into death metal. Yes, there's death, and yes, there's cannibal. But I don't know who else and Morbid, I guess. But there's not a whole lot of death metal bands that like graduated from the struggling level to the meteoric level. And nobody's ever gotten like Cannibal. They just happen to be that one band that worked their ass. Maybe Obituary might be close. I don't know. But it's tough. That's not the field you want to go into. I guess Death might have been there. Now they're way more popular probably than they were then in a lot of ways, because Deicide's probably kind of close too, but it's not like Metallica or Slayer or Anthrax. You're not bringing that kind of money in. It's just, unless you're Cannibal.
Right. And I know all those guys. I know the Cannibal guys. I know, everybody in all those bands that you mentioned pretty much. And they worked hard to get where they are.
100%. 100%.
A lot of people think it's fun, but it's not really that fun being on the road 9 or 10 months out of the year. I did it for a couple of years and I didn't really enjoy it that much. It was okay.
Especially if you're coming home with virtually no money. If you're breaking even.
We lost so much money on that Grind Crusher tour because we were the opening band. And
who was on that tour? I'm trying to remember. Was Carcass?
Us, Godflesh, and Napalm Death. It was only 3 bands.
Oh shit, that's a weird mix. That's an interesting.
That's what brought the people out, though. It really did bring really good crowds.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, the tour was very successful, but we were the opening band making $150 a night as a band.
Are you kidding me?
No. And here's the thing, the bus was more than that.
Yeah.
So we lost $50,000 on that tour. So every bit of our
merch.
Well, no, there was no merch because we had one shirt. So that didn't make the money back. It made some of the money back.
Right.
And there was supposed to be a tour shirt, but that sold out in the first 3 nights. And for some reason it was like, nope, we're not going to do a tour shirt with all 3 bands on it after this. So after the 3rd show, there was no more tour shirts there with all 3 bands on it.
Dude, that's amazing. 50 grand.
Oh yeah. All of our record sales, pretty much went to paying that back. So we never saw anything from Earache, I mean, I know we made a lot more than that, but they never sent us any, we never got any big royalty checks or anything.
Even to this day, you've really never seen any money.
No.
Yeah, I've heard Digby's kind of, we'll just stop there. But, but yeah, that blows my fucking mind, dude. That's insane. Wow. Holy mackerel. Well, all right. So to tie everything up, because I want to keep you all day here. Unicursal out on Profound Lore. There are links in the description here. I think I need to I copied and pasted from our first interview, and I think some of the links didn't transfer over, so I'll go fix that after we're done here. I've got the 2 videos, I believe, links in there for those. Really cool videos. That one, it's not for Hod, it's for the other one. Is that the first one?
Cephalogod, yeah.
Yeah, that fucking thing is bizarre, man. It's like you're using AI, and I know you talked about AI. We won't get into that because it's a thing, but that's a cool use of AI for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it wasn't where we just typed the prompt in and it did it. That's not the way we used the AI. We used it like a filter, and I did explain that, I think, in the other interview.
You did, and actually, I don't know Vincent. I might reach out to him, see if he wants to come on, but he has his own show, so probably won't want to. But you guys talked about this pretty in depth, and it is a hot topic right now, I guess, because of the Deicide album, or was it the Deicide? Yeah, the Deicide album.
No, I think the
Kerry King.
No, well, that one too. That one and the Deicide and the Pestilence.
I haven't seen the Pestilence one.
Yeah,
so I don't know that one. I'll have to check that one out too. I mean, look, I understand it to an extent because I have a shirt for my show that I paid a guy, for me, a lot of money. I dropped like $400 to make a bunch of shirts, and I think I've sold $120 worth of them. I've given away more than in fact, I gave them all away. I have 2 mediums left. That's it. But as more of a show, more of I'm using it more as a promotional type thing, and giving guys that have given me time like you, if I get some, if I can afford to do new ones, I'll reach out to you and get you one. But you got to pay these guys. I mean, real artwork is not fucking cheap, and the AI is an alternative. You would think somebody in Deicide's vein or Kerry King or something like that they would have the budget to do something a little more extravagant. But I love the artwork for Unicursal. I think it's amazing.
Well, that's real. Yeah, that is real. Yeah. I will always want to have real artwork on our covers. That's
It's not the same guy that did the key, though, right? Or it's not Seagrave, right? Yeah, because he did Thresholds too, right?
Different people do everything. Every one of them's been by a different person.
Who was Thresholds?
Same concept, but different people.
Yeah, who was Thresholds?
I don't even remember who did that one. I can't remember who that was. I didn't have a lot to do with that cover. I actually had nothing to do with that cover.
Okay.
Me, it would have had Dr. Magus on it. The character is on the key and on Unicursal.
Right.
I would have had that on the cover. And there would have been songs on Thresholds about that, but there wasn't.
Okay. Really quick, I know Vince asked you what you're listening to and about a month ago, and you brought up a name that I never knew of. Jacula? Was it Jacula?
Yeah.
Dude, I went and checked that shit out. It's insanely weird and so far ahead of its time, man. It's like, I don't know when Goblin came together, and I'm a big Goblin fan, but I don't really know. I have the book and I haven't read it. It's like that really expensive book. A friend of mine sent it to me. So I'd have to look at that. I don't know when Simonetti started that, probably in the 70s, but might have even been in the 60s. But
I heard it was in the late 60s that he actually
probably was. It probably was. But even Goblin didn't sound as evil and fucking weird as this Jacula stuff did, man.
Yeah.
That stuff is trippy as fuck, man.
And then he did the Antonius Rex after that.
Yeah.
Which was Jacula basically still, but with a different name.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull this up real quick just to show people the this is the album I was checking out last night.
Yep.
Man, it's these haunting, evil sounding, I don't know, like pipe organ and I don't know if it was real pipe organ, but it
actually is.
Was it? Okay. And then Mellotron and, Hammond B3. But then there's like this fucking crushing evil sounding guitar stuff that comes in that, yeah, it's kind of lo-fi to a degree, but it's weird stuff. I'm going to look to grab some of these.
Yeah, the first two are really amazing. And some of the Antonius Rex stuff is, there's I think the third one that they put out in the mid 70s was a little weird. It was more like had, you know, some more stuff like flutes and stuff on it too.
It was a lot more progressive, more proggy sounding. Yeah.
But the first two were just super heavy and almost like a, you know, like a Black Sabbath with an Yngwie mix to it. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It has a neoclassical vibe to it in the guitar stuff. It's weird and then there's a lot of spoken word on it and some female vocals on stuff. And
he was a, from what everything that I read, he was a pure, true, ancient style Satanist.
Oh, really? Oh, the main guy.
Yeah, he was a medieval type Satanist. He lived in a castle, and that pipe organ is a real pipe organ in the castle that he plays on there.
No way. That is crazy.
Yeah, and supposedly it's there's a satanic, real evil satanic group in the medieval type Satanism that this was all involved.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to do some research on it. I will tell you one thing. If you want to buy any of these albums, though, you better save up, because an original copy of the 69 one, $3,900, $4,000. I'm like, what?
I don't have any of the original Jacula stuff either, but
yeah, and even the reissues aren't cheap on CD. They're like $40 in the States, $50. Yeah.
I mean, you know, you can always listen to it streaming for free if you can't afford that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you, anybody that listens to the first two Jaculas will be amazed.
And I wanted to ask you if you know this one. Il Biglietto di Bronzo, Is.
I don't think so.
All right, we're gonna end it here in a second. You can write it down. Or whatever. I'll send it to you in the private chat. This is another Italian kind of evil sounding prog band. Very proggy, but very dark and atmospheric and haunting. I think you'll probably dig this a lot. Italian again. They're called Il Biglietto di Bronzo. And the album is just YS. I think you'll dig this a lot. I think you'll dig it quite a bit, especially knowing it's not as weird and trippy as the Jacula.
Yeah,
but you like prog. I know you like prog. We've already talked about that a little bit, and this is like the early 70s prog that has like it just got an evil, weird tone to it that is pretty wicked. So
nice. Yeah, I mean, I love the Goblin stuff, of course, too.
I just dropped like $200 on all the Mondo and Waxworks reissues of all the soundtracks that Goblin did, like Dawn of the Dead and Profondo Rosso and Suspiria. I already had Suspiria and Profondo Rosso on CD, but I'm getting the original, the full track listing with the special vinyls and all that stuff. I'm like, I gotta have that stuff, man. I love Goblin, man. One of my.
I got to see his tour that he did not too long ago, where he had the films going and he was playing live to them.
I don't think anyone's original in the band anymore, though, right?
No, but this was Simonetti's.
Didn't Claudio just die though? I think, or am I wrong? Uh-oh. Did you freeze again? Shit. You there, Mike?
Yeah, there you
go. Okay, there you go. Yeah. So Simonetti was still alive when you saw him then?
This was about 10, probably 7 or 8 years ago, maybe.
Okay, because I think he's passed. I'm not totally sure, but I think he's passed. But yeah, I want to let you go. Man, Mike, this has been awesome, man. I mean, I love talking to you. I could probably easily talk to you for another 2 hours, and I don't want to do that to you. You don't want to do that. So, but thank you so much for your time. Will you wait 1 minute? I want to talk to you off the stream.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Anybody real quick? Phil says, thanks so much for the interview. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jeff. Hey, man, it's all Mike. Yep. You'll like it, Phil. You're weird like me, so you'll like it. Had one last thing. I don't know what this is. Visions from Beyond the Grave. I'm sorry. Is that what song is that? Is that a Nocturnus song?
Yeah, it's one off the key.
Okay.
It's that's a weird one that I kind of just wrote out of nowhere. It doesn't really connect to anything else, but I could always look into possibly doing a second part of that, maybe, because I've done Neolithic and Paleolithic and Mesolithic, and I've done like Lake of Fire, Standing in Blood, and Seizing the Throne, and Nocturnus Will Rise. Those all kind of go together. So I never really did anything more with Visions, but it's a possibility. I mean, I never really thought about it because it was kind of like a standalone song, just about life after death, kind of. So,
Mike,
it could be possible.
Well, there you go. There's your answer there, Art. And that guy's in Moscow, Russia, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Which is kind of wild, right? I forgot there was one thing I wanted to share with you, and I'm wondering if you've seen this. I've got to guess you probably have. Let me do this real fast. Let me get that off the screen. This is going to be kind of fun, I think. Let's see how you react to this. All right, give me 1 sec. Got to pull this up. All right, you ready? Here we go. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This is hysterical, man. An Oblivion shirt.
Did somebody invite this boy in?
All right, man. Doing pretty good.
Oh, the Oblivion from Canada, is it?
Canada,
Man,
yeah.
I wish I fucking did, man. I'm telling you. I got the cash right now.
Me too.
Now, I don't want to ask you what you're talking about there. I have a feeling I know. We won't go into that, but I got a feeling I know.
Work on Melvin.
Were you there? So you were there during tracking, right? When they were tracking or mixing.
Actually, it was I had to stop in there to pick up a DAT tape.
Okay.
From Morrissound, and I didn't even realize they were in there at the time. And when I got there to pick up the tape, they were like, "Oh, Death is in there. If you want to go say hi," And I was like, "Really?"
Nice guy.
So
were you friends with all these guys?
Surprised to see me, and I was surprised to see them.
Yeah.
It's funny. You play a large role in this video. It's pretty wild, and it's funny when you hear Chuck talk. He talks like this, like a stoner surf dude, like, yo, dude, it's funny seeing those. I had heard a weird rumor, and I don't think it's true, but you never worked at Morrissound, right?
No.
Okay, yeah. I wondered about that. I pulled out. Had you seen that before?
This? Oh yeah.
Oh, I thought so. I was like, you had to have seen that, but I just thought it would be kind of. It's just funny to see that. So, all right, man. Well, look, everybody, thank you so much for showing up. We did have like 12 people at one point in time on a Sunday afternoon. That's pretty cool. And look, man, like people are still very interested in the band and what you're doing. And I think the new album is very, very good. Incredible playing on it by all you guys. Just amazing. And I actually was looking to grab the vinyl last night, and I was like, holy fuck, $50? Wow. I mean, it's not cheap. Yeah, it's not cheap.
It's a double vinyl. It's
double, which means it's about 25 each, which I've blown all this money lately, so I got to wait till next month. I got to, I can't go spending $500 a month on vinyl. I won't be eating, but yeah, everybody, thank you so much for being here. Mike was a great, huge, cool sport to be here and spend so much time. And I really appreciate it. Mike, hang on 1 second and we'll end this now. Okay.
Sure. Sounds good.
Anything you want to say to anybody or?
Well, everybody check out Unicursal and see if you like it. It's different, but so is Nocturnus, and it's a continuation of the key from and Paradox.
One last question. Do you foresee doing any touring on the back of this album at all? Like by touring, I mean, maybe festival dates or something like that?
We'll be doing some shows for sure. We've already got one in Tampa coming up, the Swarm Fest in November.
Oh, killer.
And then we'll probably next year we'll be doing some things over in Europe and South America. So we're already starting to talk to people about things.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Kelly and I are pretty good buddies, and he kind of told me, we talk pretty regularly, and when they went out with Cynic last year, man, it's just the insane. $30,000 a month to rent a fucking bus.
Oh yeah.
I mean, people don't realize just how much you guys how much bands like at your level sacrifice to go out on the road and play shows. It is,
yeah,
and especially in your 50s or 60s, man.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to do it.
That's why I like being able to do these festivals, because you can play in front of a lot more people and not have to spend 2 months, playing in front of 10,000 people.
Yeah, and you fly in, you fly out, and it's kind of yeah, and they're usually well run. I mean, you did Death Fest in 22, right? We talked about that. You did Death Fest, Maryland Death Fest in 22.
Yeah, we've done it twice.
Well, I mean, I'm just talking recently. You did the most recent one in 22, and that's a super well run festival. And
oh yeah,
you don't go in there stressing about anything and having to do a lot of your own equipment. You got their people helping you set up, and you do play to usually a pretty large crowd. So it's kind of worth doing. Whereas getting in a bus or a fucking a Sprinter van, and that's a young man's game,
Yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough.
All right, we're gonna end it here now, guys. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks so much from everybody saying thank you so much, and very cool. It's great to see such good support for Mike and his band. So hang on one sec, Mike. Okay.
All right. Awesome. Thanks to all y'all.